Chapter 465. Li Daochong glanced at Yu Yen and curled his lips. Commander Yu, have you recovered? Yu Yen smiled sweetly and let go of Li Daochong's shoulder. She turned in a circle and said, Little Chong Chong, do you think I've recovered? Li Daochong shook his head helplessly. Commander Yu, don't force yourself. It's bad for your body. Yu Yen smiled even more brilliantly. I'm just a weak woman. I won't force myself. Little Chong Chong, can you not call me Commander Yu? It sounds so distant. Call me Yen or Blurg. Some of the soldiers in the 2 rows of cultivator army finally couldn't stand it anymore. They were so disgusted that they wanted to vomit. You're a 27 or 28-year-old woman, yet you want a 20-year-old young man to call you Yen or Commander Yu. We respect you, but you don't have to be so disgusting. Many of the soldiers' faces twitched as they tried to suppress their disgust. Although Yu Yen was charming and beautiful, and could be considered to be above average among female cultivators, her overall style was full of worldly experience, and she was mature and experienced. At first glance, one could tell that she was a mature woman. Li Daochong still looked like a child. Although there was a cold glint in his eyes, it couldn't hide his immaturity. When the 2 of them stood together, one was a little fresh meat and the other was a flirtatious mature woman. How could the former call the latter Yen? Whether it was visual or auditory, it would create a huge impact. It really didn't match. Li Daochong had been teased by Yu Yen many times and was already immune to it. However, at this moment, looking at this coquettish and flirtatious woman who was stubborn and unyielding in her bones, Li Daochong couldn't help but laugh. Li Daochong wasn't an honest and ignorant youth, nor was he a shy man who would lose his mind at the sight of a beautiful woman. He had lived 2 lives and was actually much older than he looked. In his previous life, Li Daochong wasn't a playboy and didn't come into contact with many women. However, as an otaku programmer, he had done plenty of things to satisfy his desires and relieve boredom. He couldn't be pure even if he wanted to. How could Li Daochong not know about women's affairs? From the moment he woke up until now, Li Daochong seemed to be indifferent to everything, including women. The main reason was that the sense of danger in his heart was too great. In a strange environment and unfamiliar world, he was surrounded by terrifying Hades, the dark ghosts everywhere, and the bullying of the people around him. All focused his attention on killing monsters and leveling up. He wasn't interested in anything else. He didn't want to die again after dying once. At the very least, he wanted to know what was going on before he died. Sudden death was such an inexplicable way of dying. It was too King depressing. The strong sense of danger made Li Daochong focus on cultivation without any distractions. However, as Li Daochong's cultivation gradually increased and reached the peak of Jindan, the sense of danger in his heart gradually disappeared. Even the Grand Wizard could be killed instantly. There were fewer and fewer existences that could threaten Li Daochong's life. Even if the witch ancestor personally came, Li Daochong knew that he wasn't his match. However, he could still escape unscathed. Because after Li Daochong leveled up again, the Heavenly Thunder Spell had another ability. Heavenly Thunder Spell, 1000 Sound Escape. This was a super speed movement ability. As the name suggested, the 1000 Sound Escape was 1,000 times the speed of sound. After using it, it didn't look much different from teleportation with the naked eye. However, this was not the ultimate profundity of the Sky Thunder Arts escape technique. After the 1000 Sound Escape was created, Li Daochong vaguely comprehended the ultimate profundity of the Sky Thunder Arts escape technique, the Sky Thunder Art Thunderlight Escape. With Li Daochong's current power, he couldn't use the Thunderlight Escape yet. The 1000 Sound Escape was already the limit. His speed might still be incomparable to lightning, but it was already extremely terrifying. The maximum speed of a Soul Formation Grand Cultivator was only 200 or 300 times the speed of sound. This meant that Li Daochong could instantly leave a soul formation grand cultivator behind when using the thousand sound escape. The witch ancestor, Wu Ho, wanted to chase after Li Daochong, but she could only sigh in her heart. The appearance of this divine power could be said to have greatly ensured Li Daochong's safety. There weren't many people who could catch up with him, whether it was the Federation or the Rakshasa state. In the past, Li Daochong either pretended not to hear Yu Yan's flirting or ignored it coldly. Li Daochong didn't have such thoughts himself. At the same time, he didn't know Yu Yan well enough. He always wondered how such a seductive woman became the leader of the vanguard regiment. However, during the battle the day before, Li Daochong saw another side of Yu Yan. This woman's flirtatiousness was just a facade. In fact, she was probably much purer than those innocent girls. Yu Yan was just a woman who pretended to be mature and wore a flirtatious mask. It was precisely because he had a deeper understanding of her that Li Daochong felt playful in his heart. After Yu Yan put on a look of, "I'm going to flirt with you again," he put his arm around Yu Yan's slim waist. Li Daochong leaned close to Yu Yan's ear and whispered in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "Yen'er, why don't we go to the cultivation room and discuss in detail the issue of how to address me?" Yu Yan didn't expect that Li Daochong, who had always been cold, would suddenly change his personality and become so unscrupulous. With so many cultivators watching, he actually dared to do such a bold thing in public. Yu Yan's delicate little face slightly reddened. Her body went soft and she almost fell. However, she wasn't a little girl after all. How could she fall so easily? Moreover, Yu Yan liked to take the initiative and didn't like to be passive. Yu Yan turned around and broke free from Li Daochong's embrace. Her jade-like fingers brushed past Li Daochong's chin without leaving a trace, and she let out a bell-like laugh. Little Chong Chong, you've grown up. Big sister still has things to do. Hurry and go to the command room to find Big Official Qin. He really wants to see you, but he's not in a good state and can't come." After saying that, Yu Yan floated away with a burst of fragrant wind. Looking at Yu Yan's enchanting back, Li Daochong's deep eyes throbbed. He turned to look at the 2 rows of cultivators and said, "You can all disperse." All the soldiers, as if they had received an order from their superiors, straightened their chests and raised their heads, and said in unison, "Yes." Li Daochong didn't have any position in the army. Even if he did, it was a reserve position he had obtained from Xiansong University. In terms of age and rank, these cultivators were all above Li Daochong. The worst among them was a sergeant. However, Li Daochong had killed the Grand Wizard yesterday and annihilated the entire Wuguei army by himself. This had deeply engraved itself into the hearts of the soldiers. All the soldiers of the 38th Division of the Northwest Field Army suddenly felt reverence for Li Daochong. The soldiers dispersed. Li Daochong didn't go to the command room on the top floor. Instead, he walked towards the staircase where Yu Yan had disappeared. Li Daochong followed the stairs and silently sped up to keep up. Li Daochong walked to the top floor and stood at the entrance of the passage. He silently looked at the delicate figure not far away. She was holding onto an iron frame and coughing violently while clutching her chest. Puff! Yu Yan spat out a mouthful of blood and collapsed on the ground. She stretched out her trembling hands. Her palms were filled with black death qi. Her complexion was extremely ugly. She had been holding on in front of Li Daochong and the other soldiers. She had been using the last of her spirit energy to suppress the death qi. In yesterday's battle, Qin Zhan, Yu Yan, and Goddess Hong Yang were all severely injured. However, Yu Yan seemed to be in a better condition. She only suffered external injuries and didn't have any internal injuries. The alchemist at the stronghold didn't find anything wrong with her. He only gave Yu Yan some healing elixirs and let her soak in the healing chamber. The Federation's newly developed Xingfeng 003 Supreme Grade Elixir had already been distributed to the various regimental vanguard group. As long as they didn't die, they could recover 70% of their injuries after soaking in the elixir for a night. However, internal injuries couldn't be healed. They had to take elixirs. After soaking in the Xingfeng Type 003 top-grade spirit liquid for an entire night, Yu Yan's injuries seemed to have mostly healed. However, only she knew that she didn't have much time left. When Yu Yan self-detonated, she had been injected with a large amount of death qi in the intercourse. Wu ghost-level death qi wasn't something Yu Yan could resist. This death qi was extremely insidious. It penetrated deep into Yu Yan's Jin Dan and killed the Jin Dan. Yu Yan's vitality was almost halved. Moreover, this death qi couldn't be detected by medical equipment. Yu Yan knew that even the Daluo Immortal wouldn't be able to save her. The death qi in the Jin Dan spread to her heart meridians. Her entire body was rapidly withering away. Yu Yan wasn't afraid of death. She was just a little regretful that she couldn't kill more dark ghosts. It wasn't worth it. Yu Yan looked at the black blood she spat out on the ground. She wiped her mouth and said regretfully, "Li Daochong, big sister can only let you go." "Let me go? What did I do to provoke you?" Yu Yan had just finished talking to herself when a suspicious voice came from behind her. Yu Yan's delicate body shook. She didn't dare to turn around. She didn't want anyone to see her in such a sorry state, especially Li Daochong. "You followed me?" Yu Yan forced herself to be calm. "This is such a small place. Do I need to follow you?" Li Daochong said as he slowly walked towards Yu Yan. "Don't come over. I want to be alone. Cough cough. Hurry and find Qin Zhan." Yu Yan coughed violently in panic. However, before she could finish her sentence, a large hand had already grabbed her wrist. Yu Yan wanted to break free, but she didn't have any strength left. She could only bury her head, not daring to raise it. She didn't want Li Daochong to see her at her ugliest. A wisp of spirit qi entered Yu Yan's wrist from Li Daochong's fingertip and quickly flowed through Yu Yan's body. "Your injuries are so serious. Why didn't you say anything? You hid here and spat out blood? Do you think you're so cool and awesome?" Li Daochong frowned and asked angrily. "Stinky brat, I'm about to die. Why are you still so fierce? Don't you have any sympathy?" Yu Yan was so seriously injured, but she didn't forget to flirt. She didn't want to leave a bad impression on Li Daochong, and she didn't want to show her weak side. "Die my ass. I'm here. It's not that easy to die. If you die, who's going to take care of the vanguard regiment?" Li Daochong was so angry that he pulled Yu Yan over and turned her to face him. Yu Yan's lips were full of black blood. Her face was pale and her vitality was weak. She looked like a zombie. She turned her face away from Li Daochong. A large amount of spirit qi entered Yu Yan's body. Yu Yan desperately wanted to break free from Li Daochong. "Don't waste your spirit qi. The death qi has already invaded my internal organs. Jin Dan is already dead. There's no saving him. If you want to help me, then leave. I don't want anyone to see me like this." Li Daochong acted as if he didn't hear her. He controlled the Sun Jin Dan and spirit qi continuously flowed into Yu Yan's body. "Let go of me. It's none of your business. Go away." Yu Yan wanted to break free, but she didn't have any strength. Her dim eyes stared at Li Daochong. If looks could kill, Li Daochong would have been killed hundreds of times. Li Daochong didn't even look at Yu Yan. He didn't care if she was willing or not. As for Yu Yan's screams, it was as if they didn't exist. He slowly closed his eyes and concentrated on controlling his spirit qi to heal her. Yu Yan didn't stop struggling. At first, she kept shouting and yelling at Li Daochong to get lost. Gradually, her hands began to struggle. Then, her legs gained some strength and she started to kick Li Daochong. In the end, she simply raised her hand and slapped Li Daochong. Chapter 466. Yu Yan didn't realize that not only could she move, but the spirit qi in her body had also become active. Li Daochong didn't move at all after being slapped. He was like a statue. His hands were still on Yu Yan's shoulders as he continued to transfer spirit qi to her. Yu Yan looked at her hand in disbelief. Why did she have the strength to slap him? She then looked at Li Daocheng's red cheeks and felt a pang of heartache. Yu Yan had been throwing a tantrum all this time, so much so that she neglected the changes in her body. When she realized this, she began to look inside herself. Yu Yan was shocked to find that her dead Jin Dan had recovered more than half of its vitality. The dim luster was no longer there, and the faint golden light was becoming more and more dazzling. Yu Yan was also a golden Jin Dan. Her talent was indescribable. At this moment, she opened her eyes and looked at Li Daocheng in surprise. This young man's secrets were like endless treasures. He would take out some of them to blind you when you needed them. Intercourse, the death qi that invaded Yu Yan's body, was very vicious. He had used a lot of force to kill Yu Yan. Intercourse directly planted the death qi into Yu Yan's foundation. Not even a soul formation grand cultivator could save her. However, Li Daocheng did something that even a soul formation grand cultivator couldn't do. Yu Yan could clearly feel that the death qi in her foundation was being expelled bit by bit. A faint layer of fog appeared on Li Daocheng's body. The death qi in Yu Yan's body wasn't very strong, but it had penetrated too deeply. Li Daocheng had to be very careful when it came to removing the death qi. If he was too fast, he might destroy Yu Yan's foundation. As a result, Li Daocheng's energy consumption increased exponentially. If it was just removing the death qi, it would be a piece of cake for Li Daocheng. However, the death qi had penetrated too deeply into Yu Yan's body. Li Daocheng had to be very careful. If the spirit qi that he injected into Yu Yan's body was too violent, it would tear her foundation into pieces. Time ticked by. Yu Yan's body condition kept improving. When the death qi in Jin Dan was completely removed, the pale color on her face had disappeared and her cheeks were flushed. After cleaning up the foundation, the internal organs would be much easier to deal with. Li Daocheng increased the speed of dissolving the death aura. Because Li Daocheng's spiritual energy was extremely pure, it could completely dissolve all kinds of death aura. Half an hour later, Yu Yan's vitality was completely restored, and not a trace of death aura was left in her body. Yu Yan looked at Li Daocheng in astonishment. She couldn't understand how he did it. She had never heard of this kind of healing technique. Li Daocheng slowly opened his eyes. A clear blue light flashed through his eyes. The red mark left by Yu Yan's slap on his cheek faded a lot, but there was still a trace of redness. When Yu Yan slapped him, Li Daocheng didn't resist at all. The former had just recovered her spirit qi, so her slap was relatively heavy. Looking into Li Daocheng's eyes, Yu Yan revealed a shy expression for no reason. Looking at Li Daocheng's slightly red cheek, a strong sense of guilt surged in her heart. "Does it hurt?" Yu Yan asked in a rare soft voice. She slowly raised her white jade finger, wanting to stroke Li Daocheng's slightly red cheek. However, before his hand could touch Li Daocheng's face, a spiritual light flashed and the redness disappeared. Yu Yan's hand touched nothing but air. Li Daocheng had already stood up. "Commander Yu, your injuries have healed. I'm going to see Qin Zhan." "Okay, go ahead." Yu Yan's hand froze in the air. She felt a sense of loss in her heart. Li Daocheng nodded slightly, turned around and went downstairs. Looking at his tall and straight back, Yu Yan bit her lower lip and murmured, "Stinky brat, I wanted to give you a hug, but you didn't let me. It's so annoying, but thanks anyway." Li Daocheng went down from the roof and came to the command room. Qin Zhan wasn't there. When the soldiers in the command room saw him, they immediately stopped what they were doing and looked at Li Daocheng with respect. They all saluted Li Daocheng. Facing each soldier, Li Daocheng nodded slightly. One of the officers walked towards Li Daocheng with a respectful expression. He saluted and said, "Senior Li Daocheng, Master Qin is in the treatment room inside. He asked you to come. Go in directly." Li Daocheng nodded and walked towards the inner room. The door was ajar, and he could hear the sounds of a heated discussion coming from inside. Just as Li Daochong was about to push the door opened, and a young officer hurriedly walked out. Although the officer was very anxious when he saw Li Daochong, his first reaction was to salute. He was about to open his mouth to say something. Li Daochong covered his mouth with his index finger and signaled the young officer not to speak. Then he said, "Go do your thing." The young officer nodded seriously and hurried out. The door was half opened and Li Daochong quietly walked into the room. He saw Qin Zhan sitting in the spiritual liquid vat. His injuries had healed a lot, but he still looked very weak. There were several officers of the Northwest Army around the vat. Goddess Hong Yang, Fang Yuliang, and Grandma Fenghua were all there. Everyone was discussing something. Everyone's discussion was very intense, and no one noticed Li Daochong's arrival. Li Daochong's aura was restrained as if it didn't exist. Goddess Hong Yang also didn't notice. Li Daochong silently leaned against the door and listened. "Qin Zhan, why haven't the rear retreated? If it wasn't for Li Daoyu, this stronghold would have been captured long ago. Do we have to defend it to the death?" A late Jin Dan officer said angrily. "That's right, what do you think we are? Cannon fodder?" Another officer chimed in. The other three Yuanian cultivators looked at each other and didn't say anything, but their expressions showed some dissatisfaction. The central government had issued an order not long ago, asking all members of the Northwest Army's Fierce Tiger Division to hold on for another week. There was nothing wrong with the order itself. The problem was that before the order was issued, a ghost spy planted by Qin Zhan in the Hades sent a secret report. The Rakshasa state had lost 2 Grand Wizard, and Wu Ho was furious. She quickly mobilized the army on 13 Specter to launch a final attack on the demon-subduing city. If it was just a general attack, there was nothing to be afraid of. The Federation could also gather all the cultivators on 13 Specter and fight to the death with the Rakshasa state. However, the Federation didn't do so. They only mobilized the active forces in and around the demon-subduing city to deploy defense, and didn't say that they would send reinforcements. The secret report from the Rakshasa state also said that Wu Ho might personally come to 13 Specter. It was impossible for the higher-ups of the Federation not to know that Qin Zhan could get the news. Moreover, this news was very reliable because the Rakshasa state didn't hide it at all. Even if they couldn't be 100% sure, even if Wu Ho didn't come, the Rakshasa state would mobilize the entire army of 13 Specter to launch a general attack. It would be enough for the Federation to send a group of divine generals or a semi-god realm cultivator to hold the line. But there was nothing. They only allowed the soldiers of the Fierce Tiger Division to hold on for another week. The secret report showed that the Rakshasa state's general attack would take place in the next 3 days, not too long. Judging from the Federation's current layout, holding on to the demon-subduing city was equivalent to a dead end. The higher-ups of the Federation were clearly going to give up on the demon-subduing city. Has Yu Huaqin gone senile? Doesn't he know that the demon-subduing city is the Federation's vital point in the 13 Specter? Once it is taken down by the Rakshasa state, it will be impossible for the 13 Specter to recover it. The Tiger Division's deputy commander, Yuanying, was a mid-stage cultivator. Li Hu tried his best to suppress his anger. Yes, the Rakshasa state's strength is above our Federation's, but we first occupied the 13 Specter. By the time they realized that they wanted to attack the 13 Specter, it was already too late. It took them hundreds of years to gain the advantage they have now. When they occupy the 13 Specter, it will be difficult for us to counterattack. Fang Yuliang sighed slightly. Everyone, as far as I know, the reason why the higher-ups of the Federation made such a deployment is because the Rakshasa state sent out more than 600 Grand Wizard, which put a lot of pressure on the front lines. The cultivation army's strength is stretched, and there is no more power that can be mobilized to deal with the 13 Specter. Half of the cultivators here are dead or injured, and most of the rest are fighting for themselves. A considerable number of them are exiles, and they can't be mobilized at all. They can only be allowed to self-destruct on the 13 Specter. The Federation has already sent a distress signal to the 3 great cultivation empires. The other party said that they will send reinforcements, but they need to wait. The journey is too far. Goddess Hongyang saw that everyone was very agitated, so she threw out the first-hand news she knew. Qin Zhan's expression was solemn. As the supreme commander here, he could not see the current situation clearly. The military strength of the northwest stronghold of the demon-subduing city was only left with 130 Vanguard Regiment combat cultivators, 39 regular cultivation army members, 11 magic army members, 7 Yuanying cultivators, and the Yuanying Peak Great Cultivator, Goddess Hongyang. The foreign troops were the North Star University students and some rogue cultivators that Fang Yuliang brought with him. There were a total of 350 people. With all the available forces added together, they could barely form half a regiment. The guerrilla forces scattered in the various streets of the demon-subduing city were rushing to the stronghold. Qin Zhan estimated that the number of people would not exceed 1,500, and their average combat strength was around the middle stage of the Jin Dan. The Yuanying cultivators would not exceed 50. When all of them were gathered together, there were only 2 regiments. With such a small number of cultivators, it was impossible for them to resist all the dark ghosts that the Rakshasa state had gathered in the 13 Specter. They were not even enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. Moreover, their equipment was incomplete. Talismans, spirit light cannons, and various kinds of ammunition were already insufficient. Qin Zhan estimated that the ghost army gathered by the Rakshasa state was in the millions. 2 regiments against an army of 1 million? This was not hitting a rock with an egg, it was that they did not even have an egg. However, Qin Zhan's solemn expression still carried some hope. Although it was very shallow, there was still hope. The only one who could really take action in the entire stronghold was Li Daochong. He was the only nuclear weapon at the moment, a super-powerful combat strength that could instantly kill a Grand Wizard. If they made good use of him, this battle was not impossible. However, the premise was that Wu Ho did not come. If Wu Ho's cherry blossom gauze came, Qin Zhan believed that no matter how strong Li Daochong was, he would definitely not be a match for her. Even if it was rumored that Wu Ho's cultivation had only recovered 50%, she would still not be a match for him. Senior Hongyang, even if the 3 great cultivation empires send strong troops, we can't wait until then. Li Hu said with a bitter face. We have to wait even if we can't. Qin Zhan finally spoke and continued. Yan Bin, immediately take a group of people to the demon-subduing city and collect as many spirit light cannons as possible. If you encounter cultivators who can be saved, save them. As long as they can still move, come back and treat them. It's good to recover 50% of your combat strength. Yes. Yan Bin received the order and immediately turned around. However, the moment he turned around, Yan Bin was stunned. Seniorly. At this time, everyone came back to their senses and turned to look. They saw Li Daochong leaning against the door silently. No one noticed how long he had been standing there. There was not much change on his handsome face as he looked at everyone thoughtfully. Li Daochong nodded slightly to Yan Bin, then straightened his body that was leaning against the wall and walked towards Qin Zhan's spirit liquid vat. Daochong, did you hear it? Qin Zhan asked Li Daochong to come over so that he could participate in the discussion. I heard it. Li Daochong nodded. What do you think? Qin Zhan asked cautiously. Li Daochong shrugged and said, I don't have any opinion. Do you want me to kill all their Grand Wizard? Hiss. Chapter 467. Li Daochong was not joking when he said this. While listening to their discussion, he had also thought of some countermeasures. One of them was to charge into the dragon's den alone and assassinate them. The reason why he had this idea was that Li Daochong had awakened a second god art, the Thousand Sound Escape. If he did not have the Thousand Sound Escape, Li Daochong would definitely not have this idea. A day ago, Li Daochong seemed to have defeated Urumai, Sangir, and 200 Ghoul army members with an overwhelming advantage. In fact, the consumption of his power was enormous. However, no matter if he killed senior magi or ghost warriors, Ji Hao would be able to replenish his power. If Li Daochong hadn't been nourishing himself with his power, Ji Hao wouldn't have been able to wipe out the entire ghost warrior army so easily. However, the replenishment of spiritual energy could not be completely converted and was very unstable. When the battle ended, Li Daochong felt that the Sun Jin Dan was in an unstable state. His entire body swelled and was extremely uncomfortable. Therefore, after the battle ended, he immediately entered the cultivation room to adjust his breathing. Otherwise, his body might not be able to withstand the expansion of spiritual energy and self-destruct. Fortunately, Li Daochong had consumed a large amount of spiritual energy during the battle and channeled a considerable amount of spiritual energy into Tsang ink for Tsang ink to absorb. Otherwise, he would have self-destructed long ago. Therefore, it was not that easy to level up by killing monsters. In fact, the 200 Ghoul army members and 2 Grand Wizard were already Li Daochong's limit. If another Grand Wizard came, Li Daochong might very well lose. Now that he had reached the peak of the Jin Dan, his strength was naturally much stronger and could withstand more Ghoul army members and Grand Wizard. However, there was still a limit. Li Daochong could ignore the consumption of spiritual energy because he could continuously replenish it. However, his body's endurance was limited. Once he replenished too much, even if he did not self-destruct, his body's environment would become chaotic. Li Daochong's strength would also be reduced because of this. The more chaotic it was, the weaker his strength would be. He would have to adjust his breathing for a period of time to consolidate and absorb the excess spiritual energy. Therefore, even if Li Daochong could instantly kill a Grand Wizard, he was not invincible. Once the number of enemies exceeded his limit, he would not be able to defeat them. Other than that, there were also strong and weak Grand Wizard ghosts. Urumai and Sangir were considered to be the weaker ones among the Grand Wizard ghosts. If one were to give a ranking, they would be a beginner Grand Wizard. They would be slightly stronger than low-level Grand Wizards, but they would be far weaker than mid-level Grand Wizards and high-level Grand Wizards. In the entire Rakshasa state, there were only 7 or 8 advanced Grand Wizards and around 50 intermediate Grand Wizards. This was quite a terrifying combat power. Every mid-level Grand Wizard was equivalent to an early divine transformation stage mighty figure. With the strength of the human cultivators of the Federation, they would not be able to resist at all. However, the Federation had spiritual weapons of mass destruction. Spiritual nuclear bombs, demon-sealing giant formation, Yuanying level puppets, and destruction talismans above level 18 could all threaten high-level Grand Wizards. Li Daochong's current strength was comparable to an intermediate Grand Wizard. A high-level Grand Wizard would definitely not be able to defeat him. While Li Daochong was adjusting his breathing, he had already gone through the strength distribution of the ghost army of the Rakshasa state on 13 Specter. On 13 Specter, there was only 1 intermediate Grand Wizard and around 30 beginner Grand Wizards. 2/30 of them were weaker than Urumai and Sangir, 1/3 of them were about the same as Urumai, and only a few were stronger than Urumai. The number of which ghosts was much higher. According to the data in the hands of the cultivators, there were around 30,000 of them. There were more than 300,000 Soul Catcher ghosts. The number of dark ghosts below the Soul Catcher ghost was very difficult to calculate. There were so many of them that it was like a locust swarm. Li Daochong could not kill all of them by himself, but he could still assassinate the Grand Wizard. After killing 4 or 5 of them, he would use the 1,000 sound escape to escape. He would find a place to hide and adjust his breathing. Basically, it would take half a day. After recovering, he would use the same trick again. Repeating this process, he could kill more than 30 Grand Wizards in 3 days. Without the Grand Wizard, the Ghost Army would be leaderless, and there would be no way to launch a general attack on the demon-subduing city. However, all of this was just the ideal situation that Li Daochong had imagined. In reality, there were still many uncertainties. Oromai and Sanguir, the 2 idiots, died a little unjustly. Their inherent thinking killed them. They thought that human cultivators were not good at close combat. When they fought Li Daochong in close combat, they were killed instantly before they could even use their dark arts. Other than the dark arts, the Grand Wizard could also control all the dark ghosts that were lower than the witch ghost. It was a little like a mother insect. It could control the other insects and attack together. If a Grand Wizard controlled thousands of soul catcher ghosts to attack, even Li Daochong would have to retreat. Therefore, it sounded very domineering, but the risk was still very high. Of course, Li Daochong had the 1,000-sound escape. Even if he encountered danger or some crisis that he could not handle, he could just turn around and run. No one would be able to catch up. When Li Daochong had calmly asked if he should kill all the senior magi, all the people on the scene gasped in shock. For a few seconds, the entire room was silent. Li Daochong's words were too shocking. Other than the Soul Formation mighty figures, no one in the Federation would dare to say such bold words. Even though Li, who had seen Li Daochong kill 2 Grand Wizards and slaughter the Witch Ghost Army with his own eyes yesterday, he still felt that Li Daochong was bragging a little too much. Was he just a reckless man who did not think before doing things? Did he think that he could overturn the world just because he had some ability? Even the Soul Formation mighty figures might not be a match for a real high-level Grand Wizard, let alone the Witch Ancestor and Wu Ho. Not only Li Hu, but almost everyone else also felt that Li Daochong was bragging, including the goddess Hong Yang. Li Daoyu, I admire you for being a young hero, but don't you think you're exaggerating? The Grand Wizard is not someone you can kill just because you want to. Moreover, with your talent, how can you take such a big risk? You're the future hope of the Shenghua Federation. I don't agree with you doing this. A white-haired middle-stage Yuanying old man with the surname Wang objected. Elder Tang is right. Li Daoyu, you can't do anything rash. A million ghost army is not a joke, Li Hu said. Qin Zhan's expression was serious. Dao Chong, you underestimate the Rakshasa State's ghost army too much. When the Grand Wizard and the Ghost Army fight together, their combat strength will reach a higher level. When you killed Urumai and Sanguine, they didn't even use half of their strength. Li Daochong did not refute everyone's doubts. After Qin Zhan finished speaking, he asked, Master Qin, how many wounded people are here now? Qin Zhan thought for a moment and replied, about 1,000 people. The others have all evacuated. Li Daochong nodded and then asked, there should be a lot of wounded people in the demon-subduing city near the northwest stronghold. Can you send people into the city and save them as long as they're not dead? What? How can we send people out to save them at this time? Li Daoyu, do you know how big the demon-subduing city is? Even if it's just the northwest district, it's still hundreds of square kilometers. It doesn't look big, but the buildings in the city are intertwined and the terrain is extremely complicated. Search and rescue will take a lot of time and manpower. How can we care about it at this juncture? Hu asked. Li Daochong, Vice Master Li is right. We don't have much time. At this time, we should let all the soldiers rest and prepare for war. How can we go out and do this kind of dirty work? The old man surnamed Yuanying Wang objected. Qin Zhan had a suspicious look on his face. He was puzzled by Li Daochong's request. The war was imminent, and they didn't have enough manpower. It made no sense to send soldiers out to search and rescue at this time. It was true that they wanted to save people, but they had to prioritize things. They didn't know how long all the soldiers here could live. How could they be in the mood to save others? Dao Chong, this is not the time to be compassionate. Can you tell me the reason? Qin Zhan asked. There's no time to explain. Just tell me if you can arrange for people to go and rescue them. Li Daochong didn't want to waste his breath. Qin Zhan was in a difficult position. Just as he spat out 2 words, a fragrant wind blew in from outside. Little Chong Chong, if great official Qin is unwilling, I'll bring people. Yu Yen walked in from outside with a smile. As for the incident on the roof, she seemed to have forgotten about it. She stared straight at Li Daochong. Nonsense. The old man surnamed Yuanying Wang said to Yu Yen. He didn't dare to reprimand Li Daochong, but Yu Yen was different. Yu Yen just pretended not to hear. She walked in front of Li Daochong and said, Little Cho Chong, do you have any other requests? Li Daochong thought for a moment and said, Is there any equipment to make talismans here? Goddess Hong Yang didn't say anything after Li Daochong appeared. Only now did she say, Of course there is. Every stronghold in demon-subduing city is built according to the division level. There is a special talisman production room in the basement that can produce talismans below level 10 in large quantities. When Li Daochong heard this, his eyes flashed. He then asked, Are there enough materials to make talismans? Goddess Hong Yang looked at Li Daochong strangely, not knowing why he asked this. Of course there are materials. The spirit sequence masters who are still alive haven't been idle. Some of them haven't slept for days and nights. But as far as I know, there aren't many left in the inventory. Why are you asking this? A trace of excitement flashed across Li Daochong's calm face. He immediately said, Goddess Hong Yang, can you ask all the cultivators to take out their private stash of materials and send them all to the talisman production room? I might have a way to increase the efficiency and speed of production. Goddess Hong Yang was stunned for a moment. She paused for a moment and replied, If it's just to produce some low-level talismans, it shouldn't be a problem. Li Daochong nodded. Then I'll have to trouble you, goddess. The faster you collect the materials, the better. Just as he finished speaking, an officer rushed in from outside the door and said to Qin Zhan, Qin Zhan, the divine generals are here. Everyone was shocked. However, before they could recover from their shock, a clear voice had already sounded out. Qin Zhan, long time no see. Chu Tianqi, a member of the divine generals, walked into the room with a smile. He was carrying a long object wrapped in gray cloth on his back. He was much taller than the others. Everyone's eyes immediately looked at the door. They only paused on Chu Tianqi for a short while before they were attracted by the woman behind him. The woman was petite, less than 1.5 meters. Although she was short, she was well proportioned. However, the huge sword on her back was a huge contrast to her body. Chapter 468. This petite lowly was Kong Lanxin, another member of the Divine General's team. As soon as the two of them entered the room, everyone's aura was immediately suppressed. Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin didn't deliberately release their aura, nor did they do anything oppressive. Their aura was completely natural. Even a few Yuanying cultivators were easily suppressed, as if they were facing soul formation cultivators. But in fact, Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin were not soul formation cultivators. Their aura was clearly Yuanying level, not soul formation cultivators. Goddess Hong Yang was already stunning enough in everyone's eyes. She could be said to be a genius. Li Daochong raised everyone's horizons, but when Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin appeared, they were all shocked. Goddess Hong Yang and Li Daochong were both inferior. The former's aura didn't change much. Although she wasn't suppressed by the two divine generals, she obviously lost her aura and wasn't as elegant as before. Li Daochong's aura couldn't be sensed at all. It was as if he was completely suppressed. Jin Dan was Jin Dan after all. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't be compared with Yuanying cultivators who were close to the soul formation realm. When Chu Tianqi greeted them, Qin Zhan was stunned at first. Then, most of the worry on his face disappeared. He looked at the two divine generals as if he had seen the savior of the world. The two divine generals were inferior to a regular army of a division. They were even more useful. With them, it wouldn't be so easy for the Grand Wizard of the Ghost Army to act like a tyrant. After a short moment of absent-mindedness, everyone saluted the two divine generals. Even Qin Zhan, who was sitting in the spiritual liquid vat, was no exception. Even Goddess Hong Yang, who was also a divine general, bowed slightly to show her respect. Only Li Daochong stood casually without any form of expression. He just glanced at the two divine generals indifferently. Then, he looked away and continued to think about the deployment he had in mind. Tianqi, why are you here? Why didn't I hear about the transfer order? Qin Zhan asked in surprise. It was a last-minute decision. Lanxin and I are here to be personally mobilized by President Yu Huaqing for 10 days to assassinate the Grand Wizard, Chu Tianqi said with a smile. That's great. With the help of two divine generals, our chances of holding on for a week will greatly increase. The old man surnamed Wang beamed with joy. Don't worry, everyone. The three empires have already agreed to send reinforcements. However, the distance is long, and the teleportation formation can't transport that many people. They can only come by shuttle, so it will take some time. In a week, an army of 300,000 cultivators will enter 13 Specter and launch a counterattack. We just need to hold on until then. Chu Tianqi's voice was not loud, but it had a very strong calming effect, calming down the nervous emotions of everyone present. You are Li Daochong? As soon as Chu Tianqi finished speaking, Kong Lanxin walked in front of Li Daochong and looked up at him. She looked at Li Daochong with an amused expression. Yes. Li Daochong gave a short response and did not even look at Kong Lanxin. Instead, he turned to Goddess Hong Yang and said, Goddess Hong Yang, thank you for your trouble in collecting the materials. Goddess Hong Yang nodded and glanced at the two divine generals before leaving the room without saying a word. Li Daochong's cold attitude toward Kong Lanxin made the Yuanian cultivators very displeased. The divine generals had an extremely high status in the Federation. Every member of the divine generals was the hope and future of the Federation. Some of them would become soul formation stage cultivators in the future and protect the Federation. Most of them might not be able to reach the soul formation stage, but the peak power of the Yuanian cultivators was enough to make them the trump card against the invasion of the Rakshasa state. The divine generals were already the guardian gods of the Federation. Every member of the divine generals was a major general. Talented members of the divine generals like Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin were even given the rank of lieutenant general. They had special authority and could become the highest commander of any military base, even if it was an army. The so-called divine generals were the full name of the divine generals. They were an extremely special existence in the cultivation army of the Federation. They were directly subordinate to the central government of the Federation and only listened to the president. Even the highest generals in the cultivation army, such as the generals and marshals, could not command them. Any soldier who saw the divine generals had to salute. The relationship between superiors and subordinates in the army was extremely strict. Disrespect to superiors would be punished. When the two divine generals entered the room, Li Daochong did not say anything, and this was already noticed by everyone else. They were more or less displeased. Even though Li Daochong had saved their lives as soldiers, they still could not accept Li Daochong's rudeness. Even the goddess Hong Yang had expressed her respect. What was there to be arrogant about when Li Daochong was just a Jin Dan cultivator? However, Li Daochong was not a member of the army. He did not show any respect to the two divine generals, so it was not right to pursue the matter. At most, it could be considered rude. At this moment, Kong Lanxin took the initiative to talk to Li Daochong. Li Hu could not stand the indifferent look on his face. Li Daochong, General Kong is talking to you. What's with your attitude? Li Hu had been in the army for many years and had a straightforward personality. If he did not like something, he would immediately say it. Who was in charge? Li Hu was grateful that Li Daochong had saved everyone. If he had the chance to repay him in the future, he would not hesitate to do so. However, at this moment, this guy was being disrespectful to the divine generals. Li Hu could not stand it anymore and even changed the way he addressed him. It was obvious that he was really angry. In Li Hu's heart, the divine generals had an extremely high status. Every divine general was Li Hu's idol. Li Daochong coldly glanced at Li Hu. Just as he was about to speak, Qin Zhan beat him to it. Li Hu, there's nothing for you to do here. Get out. Li Hu was stunned. He did not expect that General Qin would side with Li Daochong. He was furious. General Qin, this guy is too. Shut up and get out. This is an order. Qin Zhan was also angry. Yes. Li Hu was unwilling, but he did not dare to disobey. He saluted and turned to leave in a huff. Daochong, Li Hu is a rough person. He doesn't have any bad intentions. Don't bother with him. Qin Zhan hurriedly greeted Li Daochong. At this moment, Qin Zhan wanted to twist Li Hu's head off. This guy had touched a sore spot. At this critical moment, he actually let his temper run its course. Wasn't this just looking for trouble and starting an internal conflict? In an army, one should not be afraid of a godlike opponent, but a pig-like comrade. Li Hu obviously played the role of a pig-like comrade. This guy had been in the army for so many years, but the only reason he was still a deputy was because his brain could not think straight. Qin Zhan was so angry that he almost suffered internal injuries. He had no choice but to greet Li Daochong in front of so many people. Li Daochong curled his lips and showed an indifferent expression. Even if Qin Zhan did not greet him, he would not bother with Li Hu. For a soldier, Li Hu's reaction was normal. This guy's temper was a bit fiery and impulsive, and he did not care about the situation. However, he was an excellent executor of the mission. There's nothing to bother about. The most important thing now is how to deal with the ghost army. Li Daochong said. Hearing Li Daochong's words, Qin Zhan heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Qin Zhan, I just heard you guys discussing the matter of rescuing the wounded in the demon-subduing city. I wonder which colleague suggested it? Chu Tianqi asked with a strange expression. It's me. Do you have a problem with it? Without waiting for Qin Zhan to speak, Li Daochong said indifferently. A few Yuanian cultivators blew their beards and glared at Li Daochong. This kid was too arrogant. He actually said to a divine general that he had a problem with it? Chu Tianqi turned to look at Li Daochong, and a cold light shot out from his eyes. He had just told Qin Zhan that their mission was to help and assassinate the Grand Wizard. In fact, the real mission was to investigate Li Daochong's identity. When Chu Tianqi set off from Xinghua Planet, he received a secret letter from the president. There was only one sentence on it, and it was to investigate whether Li Daochong was a witch cultivator. Other than this sentence, Yu Huaqing and the counselors didn't give Chu Tianqi any other valuable information. The deeper meaning behind this was a bit intriguing. What kind of information did the president already have? Or did he know nothing? Or was it that he had already confirmed that this guy called Li Daochong was a witch cultivator and had sent him and Kong Lanxin to kill him? Chu Tianqi was a little uncertain, but after learning that Li Daochong had killed 2 Grand Wizard with Jin Dan's cultivation, he also felt that it was very strange. The possibility that Li Daochong was a witch cultivator increased greatly. Therefore, when Chu Tianqi knew that Li Daochong actually proposed to send people to search and rescue the wounded scattered in the city at this critical moment, he immediately became suspicious. Chapter 469. Chu Tianqi's suspicion of Li Daochong suddenly increased. His proposal was obviously to consume the cultivation army of the Northwest stronghold. Rescuing the wounded at this time would increase the burden of the stronghold. In the face of the enemy, one's life was already in danger. How could he save people? How? You! Chu Tianqi narrowed his eyes and pretended to show a very strange expression on his face. Then he continued, "If you were a general in the army, I would have no objection. Unfortunately, you are not. You are not even a soldier. What's the point of your proposal?" Li Daochong frowned. Regardless of Chu Tianqi's reason, he only said, "If you want to increase the chance of resisting the ghost army, listen to me." "Listen to you? Who do you think you are?" Chu Tianqi's voice turned cold. Li Daochong's attitude of ignoring him and Kong Lanxin had already annoyed him. He actually dared to ask him if he had an opinion in front of so many people? Li Daochong's face also darkened. "If you don't want to listen to me, then forget it." With that, Li Daochong was about to leave. Seeing this, Fang Yuliang hurriedly stopped Li Daochong. "Li Daoyu, don't be impulsive. Let's talk about it." After interacting with Li Daochong, Fang Yuliang knew that this young man was relatively straightforward and did not like to explain too much. After hearing what Chu Tianqi said, Li Daochong probably would not stay in the northwest stronghold anymore. Qin Zhan looked embarrassed. On one side was the immortal general, and on the other side was the genius he liked. Both sides were the backbone of the resistance against the ghost army in 3 days. Without either side, the northwest stronghold, which was in danger, would suffer a great loss. Qin Zhan hurriedly said, "Daochong, Brother Fang is right. Let's talk about it. We need you." "Let him go." "Qin Zhan, are you out of your mind? You don't even know how many men you have on hand. Sending people out to rescue the wounded at this time is simply a waste of time and will only increase the consumption. If you want to save the wounded, you have to wait for the reinforcements to arrive. With the manpower you have now, not only will you not be able to help the wounded, but you will also harm the others. I think the person who made this suggestion is either out of his mind or has ulterior motives, right?" Chu Tianqi's sharp gaze shot towards Li Daochong, as if he wanted to see through the latter. This. Qin Zhan was dumbfounded. He didn't expect Chu Tianqi to react so strongly. Once these words were spoken, there was no way to salvage the situation. Li Daochong pushed Fang Yuliang away and said indifferently, "If you don't want to carry out the rescue plan, then I'll do it myself." After that, Li Daochong disappeared in a flash. Yu Yan was anxious. She glared at Qin Zhan, who didn't say anything, and turned to chase after him. Chu Tianqi suddenly used his telekinesis to transmit his voice, and the entire northwest stronghold could hear his voice. "All self-cultivators, listen up. In the next 3 days, no one is allowed to leave the stronghold without permission. Violators will be punished according to military law. In addition, Li Daochong will be expelled from the stronghold." What? Qin Zhan was really anxious. However, it was useless to be anxious. The order had already been issued, and it couldn't be taken back. "Sir, Li Daochong's combat strength is outstanding. He can kill the Grand Wizard. It's not good to offend him like this." A Yuanian cultivator also felt that Chu Tianqi was a little too impulsive. If he can kill the Grand Wizard, then can he not use his brain and give out random suggestions? The most important thing now is to prepare for war. Use the fastest time to strengthen the stronghold's defense and come up with the best battle plan. Lanxin and I brought a lot of supplies. In the next 2 days, distribute them one by one and reorganize the troop," Chu Tianqi said with a cold smile. While Chu Tianqi was speaking, Kong Lanxin had already taken out a storage box. The box wasn't big. It was 20 inches long and 10 inches wide. However, the space inside the box was astonishingly large. It was the size of 10 football fields and could carry hundreds of thousands of tons of supplies. Kong Lanxin turned on the spirit light projector, and the supplies inside the storage box suddenly appeared in front of everyone. 1/3 of the space inside was filled with all kinds of magic treasures, ammunition, and spirit talismans. The other 2/3 were lined up with rows of steel puppets. Each of them was of the Jin Dan level. There were also hundreds of Yuanying level steel puppets standing together. In addition, there were hundreds of combat shuttles, hundreds of spirit light cannons, and a large defensive spirit array release device. Seeing so many powerful equipment, everyone's heart was lifted. The haze of Li Daochong's departure instantly disappeared. When Li Daochong left just now, the generals who had seen Li Daochong's combat strength yesterday all felt a sense of unease in their hearts. After all, Li Daochong's combat strength was there for all to see. If he left, the losses would be great. However, with this equipment, not only would they be able to make up for the losses caused by Li Daochong's departure, they would also be able to make up for it. Every cultivator could be armed to the teeth. Coupled with the steel puppet army and the combat shuttles, the strength of the stronghold would reach the combat strength of an army corps. It might not be enough to face the million ghost army head-on, but if they could only defend for a week, their chances would greatly increase. Under the leadership of the two divine generals, all the previous proposals were overturned. Everyone began to discuss a new war preparation plan. Apart from Yu Yan, no one cared about Li Daochong. Even Qin Zhan was silent, carefully listening to Chu Tianqi's arrangements. It wasn't that Qin Zhan didn't want to take care of Li Daochong, but as a soldier, when the war was imminent, his mind was only focused on the war itself. He didn't have the mind to think about anything else. Li Daochong didn't expect Chu Tianqi to immediately give the order to expel him. Originally, he wanted to go to the talisman production room to take a look, but since he was chased away, there was no need for him to stay. Li Daochong directly turned into a green light and flew out of the command building. Li Daochong, wait. Yu Yan saw that she couldn't catch up, so she sent a telepathic message. Li Daochong, who had already flown a few kilometers away, turned around and floated in the air. He looked at Yu Yan, who was anxiously chasing after him, and said, "Why are you chasing me? Go back, the combat cultivators of the Vanguard group need you." Yu Yan saw that Li Daochong had stopped, so she increased her speed and quickly arrived in front of him. She pursed her lips and said, "Are you really going to leave?" Li Daochong shrugged his shoulders. "What else can I do? Are you shameless enough to not leave?" Yu Yan's expression darkened. "Where are you going? You don't care about the life and death of the soldiers of the Northwest Stronghold. Do you not care about the demon-subduing city? Don't tell me you don't know what it means to lose the demon-subduing city? The collateral effect will affect the entire battle." Li Daochong suddenly smiled. "Am I that cold-blooded in your heart?" Yu Yan was stunned. "Then where are you going?" "To save people," Li Daochong said matter-of-factly. "Save people? Alone?" Yu Yan was dumbfounded. "No, I'll see if I can find the support team of North Star University and gather some people to come with me. There can't be no living people in the demon-subduing city that can move, right?" Li Daochong said seriously. "There must be living people. Can you tell me why you must save people?" Yu Yan was puzzled. "Because I can save them, so I have to save them," Li Daochong replied. Yu Yan racked her brains but still couldn't figure out what he meant. After pausing for a moment, she finally said, "Since you said you can save them, I believe you. I'll go with you." Li Daochong thought for a while and said, "Then can you bring the Vanguard Group's combat cultivators with me?" Yu Yan smiled and said, "Of course." Immediately, Yu Yan pressed her watch and sent out an encrypted message that only the members of the Vanguard Group could receive. Not long after, dozens of rays of light flew out from the command building of the Northwest Stronghold and gathered in front of Yu Yan. There were a total of 53 people, and not all of the Vanguard Group's combat cultivators could listen to Yu Yan regardless of everything. There were still many combat cultivators who did not dare to disobey Chu Tianqi's orders. Being punished by the military law was not a joke. The 77 combat cultivators of the Vanguard Group chose to stay. Between Yu Yan and the God General, they chose the God General. Among the 53, Ning Xiujie, Xiao Ying, and Ling Fei were among them. When the three of them saw Li Daochong, their hearts surged with incomparable enthusiasm. The three of them had seen everything yesterday. Li Daochong's strength had deeply impressed them. On tongue-pulling planet, Li Daochong had already saved the three of them twice. Including this time, it was 3 times. Those who left the stronghold without permission, please return to the stronghold immediately. If you don't return within 3 minutes, you will be punished by the military law. Chu Tianqi's voice suddenly sounded. Chu Tianqi's bureaucratic tone again and again finally angered Li Daochong. Previously, Li Daochong did not bicker with him because he was too lazy to care. Moreover, he was not a member of the military and had no position. There was nothing to say if the other party did not accept his suggestion. Yu Yan led the 53 combat cultivators of the vanguard group to follow him without hesitation. Li Daochong was no longer alone and had responsibilities on his shoulders. Li Daochong did not want these combat cultivators to follow him and be punished by the military law. Li Daochong took a deep breath and shouted in the direction of the command building. Chapter 470. Li Daochong's voice resounded like thunder in the command building, striking at their hearts. All the soldiers suddenly realized something. Chu Tianqi was a divine general with a high status, but he could not ignore the bloody battle the soldiers had just gone through. The peace these past few days had been exchanged for with the lives of all the soldiers. We fought with our lives on the line, but you came with a bureaucratic tone and issued an unfounded order. Those who disobey will be dealt with according to military law. Do you think we soldiers are slaves? For a moment, the morale of the soldiers was shaken. Some people even began to demand an explanation. Some hot-tempered soldiers simply walked out of the command building and stood on the street, shouting and cursing. Come on, punish me. I just fought a battle to the death. Can't I come out to take a breather? Chu Tianqi stood on the top floor and looked outside with an ashen face. His order just now was indeed a little reckless. What's wrong with me? How could I do something so unprofessional? Kong Lanxin's eyes emitted a dazzling light as she looked at the distant sky through the floor-to-ceiling window at Li Daochong, who was floating there. What an interesting guy. Tianqi, you've been made a fool of. Quickly think of a way to calm the soldiers. The battle is imminent, and you still issued such an order. You're forcing a rebellion. Qin Zhan looked worried. Li Daochong and Chu Tianqi's enmity could be considered to have been formed. This brought a haze to the battle 3 days later. With the enemy in front of them, internal strife had been stirred up. Qin Zhan sighed in his heart. There was nothing he could do. He could only take one step at a time. Qin Zhan, it's not good. A young officer suddenly rushed in with an anxious face. What's the matter? Qin Zhan frowned. Many soldiers want to leave. They say they want to go with Li Daochong, the young officer said. Qin Zhan cursed Chu Tianqi's ancestors in his heart. What's wrong with this guy today? As a divine general, he has no sense of propriety. It's fine if you have a conflict with Li Daochong, but why did you issue such an order? If people want to leave, are you going to suppress them? Of course not. Qin Zhan had no choice but to look at the initiator, Chu Tianqi. The latter also understood the seriousness of the situation. This Li Daochong was not simple. With just a few words, he was able to shake the general's morale. He blamed himself for being blinded by the issue of shaman cultivation. Distribute the equipment immediately. Everyone will be rewarded with another 10,000 medial-grade spirit stones. Put it on my tab, Chu Tianqi said with a pained expression. Yes. The young officer saluted and was about to leave when Qin Zhan stopped him. Wait a minute. The young officer didn't understand. Qin Zhan turned to Chu Tianqi and said, Tianqi, it's useless to rely on rewards alone. Take back the military order you just issued. Otherwise, the soldiers will really all leave. Chu Tianqi's face darkened. A divine general's words carried enormous weight. How could he take it back just like that? If he really did take it back, wouldn't he be admitting that he was wrong? Seeing that Chu Tianqi didn't say anything, Kong Lanxin, who was standing at the side, finally said, "Announce that the military order just now is targeted at non-military members." Qin Zhan and Chu Tianqi's eyes lit up. They both looked at Kong Lanxin with praise. This lowly divine general, who looked like a little girl, resolved the crisis with just a few words. In this way, not only did she save Chu Tianqi's face, but she could also appease the people. The number of military personnel and non-military personnel in the command building was split evenly. Most of the non-military personnel were hired by the military for money. Their status was lower. As long as they were paid enough, they were willing to do anything without any complaint. Soon, the news spread, and the soldiers who were causing trouble were finally appeased. In addition, high-end equipment and rewards were distributed. The impact of Li Daocheng's words was finally dispelled. However, there were still some soldiers who followed Yu Yan. A total of 32 combat cultivators left the command building in anger. In this way, in addition to the 53 people Yu Yan brought with her, the team had expanded to 85 people. Li Daocheng didn't stay any longer. He led Yu Yan and the rest of the combat cultivators and flew into the sky. Chu Tianqi could only stand in front of the window and stare. It wasn't that he didn't think of going out to fight Li Daocheng. In the end, he gave up on the idea. It was a fact that Li Daocheng had killed the Grand Wizard. It wouldn't be so easy for him to fight him. Even if he could win, it would be a lose-lose situation. The northwest stronghold and the surrounding city might even be completely destroyed. Chu Tianqi suppressed the anger in his heart and watched Li Daocheng disappear into the dark void with his people. "Tianqi, are you hiding something from me? What's the mission that you came to 13 Specter with General Kong this time?" Qin Zhan was suspicious. There were two major factions in the Federation's upper echelons. One was the President's faction, and the other was the Councilor's faction. These two factions had been fighting openly and secretly for the past few years. Although they didn't dare to go overboard on major issues, they didn't give in to each other on matters that were insignificant or wouldn't affect the war. Qin Zhan himself was a member of the President's faction. However, as far as he knew, the Divine Generals had always been the President's people. Why did Chu Tianqi come over to pick a fight? Qin Zhan was personally promoted by Yu Huaqing. No matter what, Chu Tianqi should give him some face. Chu Tianqi was silent for a while before he said, "Chief Qin, how much do you know about this Li Daocheng?" Qin Zhan was stunned. He didn't know why Chu Tianqi suddenly asked such a question. He said bluntly, "I don't know much about him. However, I've never seen this kid's talent before. He'll definitely achieve great things in the future. What's wrong? Is there a problem?" Chu Tianqi shook his head. "No problem. I just feel that this kid is a little weird. Alright, let's get back to the topic. Let's think about how to deploy the troop. It won't be easy in 3 days." Kong Lanxin carried her great sword on her back and looked at the holographic map projected in the center of the room. She had a headache when it came to boring armchair strategies. Li Daocheng led his team of 85 people and did not fly far before they landed and entered the city's street. 85 combat cultivators, including Li Daocheng and Yu Yan, there were a total of 87 people. Naturally, the manpower was far from Li Daocheng's expectations. However, this was much better than him going out alone. Time was of the essence. Li Daocheng landed and immediately found a 3-story building. There was nothing special about this building. It was just that it was relatively large. Each floor was about a few thousand square meters. The first floor was a large hall, while the second and third floors had many rooms. After entering the building, Li Daocheng immediately began to assign tasks. Yu Yan assisted from the side. First, they were divided into small groups. The 85 people could be split into groups of 5. They were divided into 17 groups according to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of the groups were tasked to enter the city to search for intact spiritual computers, recording devices, and materials. The other 12 groups were responsible for rescuing people. As long as they were not dead, they would be brought back. Li Daochong did not have much equipment on him. The most he had were spirit stones. He took out more than half of them and distributed them equally to everyone. The search and rescue work was very tedious and consumed a lot of energy. They had to fly around, move stones, dig bricks, and dig holes. It was even more troublesome to encounter wounded people who were crushed under the ruins or turned into ghosts. If they were not given enough spirit stones, they would be exhausted soon. Li Daochong also had a few flying shuttles in his storage ring. He also took them out and gave them to the search and rescue team. He asked the search and rescue team to gather all the wounded people in this building. After the allocation, the 17 groups immediately began to move. Li Daochong and Yu Yan looked for surviving support teams. More than a week ago, the North Star University sent tens of thousands of students. They were all involved in the battle. However, most of them did not defend the stronghold. Instead, they were scattered in the demon-subduing city and engaged in guerrilla warfare with the ghost. Other than these students, there were also cultivators and exiles who had not evacuated before. The number of these people was even more. They were the natives of the demon-subduing city, and there were almost 1 million of them. The Northwest stronghold had at least 100,000 people. This was a very huge force. However, the previous general attack of the Ghost Army had already penetrated into every corner of the demon-subduing city. Other than a few strongholds, the other places in the demon-subduing city were no longer safe. There were all kinds of nether ghosts wandering around, as well as some soul-catcher ghosts and witch ghosts lurking in the houses. If one was not careful, one could be ambushed. Li Daochong stepped on the Tsang ink and flew at a constant speed in the air with Yu Yan. His spirit sense enveloped the area below and searched every area. On 13 Specter, the spirit sense of a cultivator would be suppressed, and compared to the normal state, it would be compressed to 1/3 of its original state. Even if Li Daochong's spirit sense was strong, he could not escape. After hundreds of years of cruel war, the aura on the planet was already chaotic. Spirit chi and death chi were mixed together, and thunder in the clouds high in the sky rose and fell one after another, never stopping. The thunder was actually the result of the destruction of the spirit energy and the death aura after they were completely intertwined. The air pressure on the ground was extremely high, and the air was almost viscous. The area where the spirit energy was strong would block the death aura, and the area where the death aura was strong would block the spirit energy. In addition to all kinds of unstable energy fluctuations, the penetration power of the spirit sense on 13 Specter would be greatly reduced, and so would the sensitivity. Li Daochong's spirit power was currently huge, and it had also been compressed to 1/3 of its original size. If he did not search so accurately, a radius of 50 kilometers would be within his grasp, but now, he could only search an area of 15 kilometers, and the area was greatly reduced. However, this detection range was enough. Li Daochong flew at a slow speed, and within a few hours, he discovered 5 groups of people. However, 3 of them were exiles. Their faces were ferocious, and their hearts were ruthless. They were all outlaws. Li Daochong did not want to rope these people in, but he could not kill them either, because as long as they lived in the demon-subduing city, they would be the power of the Nether Ghost. The other 2 groups of people were rogue cultivators who had come to the demon-subduing city to seek gold. They had come here through the Netherworld token. The 2 groups of people added up to a total of 100 people. Li Daochong and Yu Yan spent a lot of time persuading them, but the effect was minimal. In the end, Li Daochong took out the last of his spirit stones, and the 2 groups reluctantly agreed to follow Li Daochong to save people. Just like this, a day passed. The Combat Cultivator Group and the Rogue Cultivator Group had saved a total of over 1,000 cultivators. Nearly half of them were on their last breaths, and the other half were also deeply affected by the death aura. These cultivators had all killed the Nether Ghost in their battle with the Nether Ghost, but they themselves no longer had the strength to fight. At night, the search and rescue team continued to work. Li Daochong looked at the more than 1,200 injured people, and felt a little uncertain. Yu Yan and a few other combat cultivators followed Li Daochong's instructions and pulled the hands of all the injured people together. Li Daochong looked at the injured person who had already lost consciousness and took a deep breath. The spirit energy in his body surged out and gathered on his palms. With a light push, he patted the injured person's shoulders. More than 1,200 injured people were all connected together. Li Daochong's spirit energy instantly flowed through everyone's bodies. From the moment Li Daochong proposed to save people, he had a bold idea. He would treat hundreds or thousands of people at once, and if everything went smoothly in 3 days, he should be able to restore tens of thousands of people to their original fighting strength. This way, their strength would greatly increase. It was just that doing this would consume a lot of Li Daochong's energy, but there were Nether Ghosts everywhere in the demon-subduing city, so as long as he killed a large number of them, the spirit energy would naturally be replenished. Chapter 471. Li Daochong's behavior confused the combat cultivators present. They didn't know what he was trying to do. "Senior Li, are you trying to heal more than 1,000 people at the same time?" a combat cultivator asked suspiciously. In his opinion, this behavior was too unbelievable. He had never heard of it before. "I think so," a combat cultivator next to him said uncertainly. There was a strong suspicion in his eyes. Healing with qi was a very common healing method among cultivators. However, it was all one-on-one healing with qi. However, even one-on-one healing would consume a lot of energy. These combat cultivators didn't even dare to think about healing more than 1,000 people with qi. Even a soul formation grand cultivator might not be able to do it. Healing with qi was a stupid method that had a good effect but consumed a lot of energy for the healer. It was already the limit for a soul formation divine lord to heal more than 12 people. Not to mention these combat cultivators who didn't know much about Li Daochong, even Yu Yan was confused. She was saved by Li Daochong. She knew that Li Daochong had a magical healing method, but he could heal so many people at once. Yu Yan was also suspicious. She felt that it was impossible. If he used the supreme-grade spirit liquid to heal so many people at the same time, he would need to evaporate at least hundreds of tons. Others didn't believe it. Li Daochong wasn't completely sure either. It was Li Daochong's first time healing so many people at the same time. In the past, he had only treated one person. Li Daochong wasn't confident that he could heal more than 1,000 people at once. However, the cultivation of these injured people wasn't high. More than 80% of them were only at the foundation establishment realm. There were about 300 Jindan cultivators, less than 50 at the late stage of Jindan, and more than 30 Yuanian cultivators. Even so, it was still a huge challenge for Li Daochong. Fortunately, Li Daochong didn't need to nourish their bodies. He mainly needed to get rid of the death qi and let the injured recover to a state where they could regulate their breathing. Once the death qi was expelled, the cultivators would be able to heal themselves. If they soaked in the spirit liquid, their injuries could be healed in an extremely short period of time. For the first wave of treatment, Li Daochong's consumption would be greater. The building he found was barren and empty. Li Daochong divided 2 groups of cultivators to search for treatment equipment. The demon-subduing city was originally a super-large military base city. Other than the strongholds, every corner of the city would more or less have all kinds of spiritual machinery and equipment. Some of them were brought over by the itinerant cultivators who came to make deals. Even after the war, there must still be a lot of intact equipment in the city. Li Daochong unreservedly guided out the spiritual energy in his body and invaded everyone's body. In the beginning, Li Daochong was still able to handle it with ease. However, when the spiritual energy spread to hundreds of people, Li Daochong began to struggle. As the spiritual energy continued to spread, the pressure on Li Daochong became greater and greater. The death qi in one's body was nothing to Li Daochong. When more than 1,000 people gathered together, it was another matter. Cultivators above the Jin Dan stage would also be subjected to higher levels of death qi. Half an hour later, Li Daochong's entire body was drenched in sweat. Mist lingered on his head, and his entire body seemed to be wrapped in clouds. Li Daochong's face gradually turned pale, and his aura weakened bit by bit. A large amount of death qi tried to counterattack. A few minutes later, Li Daochong could no longer hold on. However, the death qi had not been expelled yet. Quickly, thump! Li Daochong's eyes suddenly opened. There were flashing sparks in his eyes. He could only use the spirit sun lightning, otherwise he would be swallowed by the death qi. Thump! Thump! The suppressed lightning power passed through Li Daochong's body and instantly flowed to everyone's body. The entire hall on the first floor flickered like a flashlight. With a snap, the sparks disappeared. Electric therapy. Li Daochong had accidentally learned another treatment technique. Electric therapy was extremely effective against the death qi. The pressure on Li Daochong's body suddenly lessened a lot. The power of the Yang Thunder just now had completely suppressed the raging death qi. Li Daochong shouted softly in a spurt of energy. His spiritual energy moved like mountains and overturned the seas, instantly annihilating the remaining death qi. Huff, huff. Li Daochong's breathing became rapid. His body seemed to have been hollowed out. Even standing up seemed to be extremely difficult. His body seemed to be filled with lead. When Li Daochong withdrew his hands, the cultivator who had fainted in front of him slowly opened his eyes. His gaze was filled with surprise. In fact, this cultivator had already woken up. It was just that Li Daochong had transmitted a voice to him, telling him not to move. During the entire process, this cultivator acted as a medium. Through his body, the spiritual energy was transmitted to the people behind him. More than 1,200 cultivators looked at each other, then lowered their heads to look at themselves. The death qi in their bodies had basically been eliminated. Even if there were some remnants, it didn't matter. It was just some scattered death qi. Unbelievable, unbelievable. It was common knowledge among all cultivators that it was completely impossible for one person to heal more than 1,000 people at the same time. Yu Yan's pair of beautiful eyes blinked as she looked at Li Daochong. This brat had made the impossible possible, but how did he do it? Li Daochong calmed his breathing and said, "I've only expelled the death aura from your bodies. Your injuries haven't healed yet, so you'll need to heal yourselves. There's no healing equipment here, but I'm sure everyone has some in their storage rings. If you have extra, take them out and distribute them to everyone. There's not much time left, so everyone should try to recover as soon as possible." After saying this, Li Daochong whispered a few words to Yu Yan, then summoned Song Ink and slowly flew out. Li Daochong was on the verge of collapsing. Treating so many people at the same time was a bit too much for him. There had even been some hiccups in the process. If it weren't for the Yang Lightning as insurance, the death qi would have most likely backfired on Li Daochong. Li Daochong urgently needed to replenish his spiritual energy. Li Daochong took out a few recovery spirit medicines and swallowed them in one gulp. Li Daochong didn't have any powerful recovery spirit medicines. He only had a few ordinary ones. Taking a few would only restore a very limited amount of spiritual energy. Taking too many wouldn't be of much use. However, recovering a little was better than not recovering at all. Li Daochong left the hall and extended his divine sense like a radar. Because his body was extremely weak, the range of his perception was reduced to a range of several hundred meters. However, all the nether ghosts within this range had nowhere to hide. Li Daocheng's entire body flickered with lightning. He did not even need to make a move. The sparks released by the spirit sun lightning were enough to kill the low-level nether ghost. After sweeping through a block, thousands of nether ghosts of all sizes were swept away by Li Daocheng. However, the most powerful nether ghost was only a red shadow ghost. Most of them were low-level nether ghosts, and there were many green ghosts. After the nether ghosts below the soul-devouring ghost were killed by Li Daocheng, the amount of spiritual energy transformed from their dead souls was extremely limited, not even enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. Li Daocheng had only recovered less than 1% of his spiritual energy from so many low-level nether ghost dead souls. After sweeping through another block, he still only recovered a small amount of spiritual energy. The low-level nether ghosts were no longer of any value to Li Daocheng. Li Daocheng suddenly realized that his previous idea seemed to have been taken for granted. If there were no powerful nether ghosts, with just these low-level nether ghosts, he would probably have to clean up the entire demon-subduing city before he could fully recover. This way, there was no way to carry out the next treatment. If he were to do it again, where would Li Daocheng go to recover his spiritual energy? Li Daocheng's gaze congealed. He retracted his spirit sense, and when he released it again, it condensed into a line and shot out. This way, the range of his spirit sense would greatly increase, but the range would be greatly reduced, and he could only probe in this straight line. His spirit sense condensed into a rope and shot out more than 30 kilometers. There were at least a dozen soul-devouring ghosts, 2 low-level witch ghosts, and a few Ghost King-level nether ghosts on this line. The corner of Li Daocheng's mouth raised slightly. His mind power activated Song Ink, and with a swoosh, it turned into a green light and flew out. Lightning flashed on the green light, making sizzling sounds, as if a bolt of lightning had struck out. Wherever it passed, all the nether ghosts were annihilated in the lightning, not even having a chance to react before they were annihilated. The Ghost King was also unable to withstand the lightning and was reduced to dust in the wind. Along the way, many cultivators were still fiercely fighting with the nether ghosts, and the situation was extremely dangerous. Just when they thought they were about to die, a green light suddenly flashed by, and the terrifying nether ghosts were instantly destroyed before their eyes, vanishing in the blink of an eye. These cultivators who were on the verge of death stared in shock as the green light flashed by, annihilating all the evil spirits and evil ghosts. 5 of the cultivators encountered low-level witch ghosts and fought for a day and a night. The 5 cultivators were all injured to varying degrees and were on the verge of death. They thought that the 5 of them would die here. But sometimes, happiness came too suddenly. Just when the 5 of them were in despair, the green light flashed by, leaving behind nothing but a flash and a sizzling sound. When the green light passed by, the witch ghost was burnt to a crisp in front of the 5 cultivators and turned to dust with a gust of wind. Li Daocheng crossed more than 30 kilometers and killed all the nether ghosts in this line. The might of Yang lightning was intimidating. Hades' creatures trembled in fear at the sight of it. This time, not a single ghost was left on the antenna. This time, Li Daocheng's spirit chi was clearly replenished. A dozen soul-catcher ghosts and 1 low-level witch ghost allowed Li Daocheng's spirit chi to recover by 80%. Because his body was exhausted, Li Daocheng's cultivation didn't increase at all. All the spirit chi he obtained was used to recover. After recovering more than half, Li Daocheng's psychic power was almost completely restored, making it easier to find high-level nether ghosts. A few minutes later, Li Daocheng found a few soul-catcher ghosts and killed them before returning to the temporary building. Li Daocheng had only been gone for a little more than an hour, but the first floor's hall had already changed. It had been reorganized into a treatment hall, while the second and third floors were used as follow-up treatment rooms. At this time, many cultivators were continuing to recover on the second and third floors. Many rooms had jars of spirit liquid and sealed jars for storing spirit liquid. These were all taken out by the cultivators Li Daochong treated. The Jin Dan and Yuanying cultivators' private stashes were quite impressive. Under Yu Yan's command, the cultivators acted in an orderly manner, fast but not chaotic. Except for the cultivators with serious injuries, the other cultivators who were able to move did their best to help. Seeing Li Daochong return, all the cultivators treated by Li Daochong came forward to thank him. No need to be so polite, there will be a fierce battle in 2 days. If you really want to thank me, then work together to fight against the ghost army. Li Daochong, my life was saved by you, I'm at your disposal. Someone shouted. Yes, let those bastards come. Seeing the high spirits of the cultivators, Li Daochong showed a gratified smile, but quickly calmed down. Li Daochong received Yu Yan's psychic power transmission. Dozens of spirit computers had been placed in a large room on the 3rd floor according to his instructions. Chapter 472. Saving people was only the first step. The strength of demon-subduing city was limited after all. Against a million ghost army, it was useless without equipment. Li Daochong looked at the dozens of spiritual computers in front of him and took a deep breath. He had never made spirit talismans in batches before. However, he definitely couldn't do it alone. He needed someone to help him. Captain Yu, are there any spirit sequencers among the rescued cultivators? Li Daochong turned and asked. Yes, but there aren't many of them. There are about 30 or so spirit sequencers who aren't very high-ranked, Yu Yan replied curiously. What was Li Daochong going to do this time? Yu Yan's eyes flickered. She had some guesses, but she wasn't sure. Could it be that this kid was also a spirit sequencer? More than 30? Li Daochong pondered and continued, that should be enough. Call them all over. Yu Yan nodded and turned to leave the room. Soon, more than 30 cultivators were brought in. These cultivators had different cultivation levels. There were Foundation Establishment, Jin Dan, and Yuanying cultivators. The ratio of Foundation Establishment was the highest, and 25 of them were Foundation Establishment cultivators. However, the standard of a spirit sequencer couldn't be judged by cultivation level. A Foundation Establishment cultivator could also become a very powerful first-grade spirit sequencer. Li Daoyu, did you call us over to make spirit talismans? Qian Feng asked when he saw the dozens of spiritual computers lined up in the room and the recording device beside each one. Qian Feng was an early Yuanying cultivator. He came to 13 Specter to make a fortune. He wanted to kill dark ghosts to obtain points and exchange them for cultivation resources from the military. After coming to 13 Specter for less than half a year, he encountered an extreme war. Qian Feng didn't get many resources and almost lost his life. If it wasn't for Li Daochong, Qian Feng would probably have been found by a lucky low-level dark ghost in the ruins. Then, it would devour his human soul and Yuanying, advancing into a high-level dark ghost in one fell swoop. If a green ghost could completely devour a Yuanying cultivator, it could evolve into a soul-catcher ghost at the very least. Qian Feng was injured in a fight with a low-level witch ghost. Although he killed the witch ghost, he suffered irreversible injuries and could only lie in the ruins and wait for death. Qian Feng was a battle-type cultivator, but he dabbled in a wide range of fields. He had some achievements in both spirit sequence and artifact refinement, and had a first-grade spirit sequence master certification. Among this group of cultivators, Qian Feng's attainments in spirit order could be ranked second. Ranked first was a Foundation Establishment Realm Elder. He was a special-grade spirit sequencer and was considered a very powerful one in the Federation. The old man's name was Tang Guangbei. He had come to 13 Specter in search of a special material, the extreme Een crystal. Unfortunately, not long after arriving at 13 Specter, a war broke out. All the cultivators who came with Tang Guangbei had died, and he was the only one left alive. He had relied on a large number of spirit talismans to survive until now. When the rescue cultivators found him, he was entangled by 2 black death vines. If they had found him a little later, he would have died. That's right. I called everyone here to make spirit talismans. In 2 days we will face an army of 1,000,000 ghosts. It's unrealistic to rely on our current strength to resist. I'm afraid that everyone will be annihilated in one move. Spirit talismans are the simplest and most effective single-use weapon to kill dark ghosts. I plan to make 100,000 spirit talismans in 2 days, Li Daochong nodded and replied. As soon as he finished speaking, the room was filled with gasps. Yu Yan froze on the spot. Her brain couldn't process this. What? 100,000? Tang Guangbei exclaimed. He looked at Li Daochong as if he was looking at an idiot. Li Daoyu, with your current manpower and equipment, you want to make 100,000 spirit talismans in 2 days? To put it nicely, it's a fool's dream. To put it bluntly, it's nonsense. Tang Guangbei was naturally grateful to Li Daochong for saving his life. However, when it came to academic matters, he would still argue with reason. He wouldn't abandon the spirit of seeking truth just because he was indebted to Li Daochong. Li Daoyu, Elder Tang is right. Even the Federation's most advanced large-scale spirit brain wouldn't be able to do it, let alone this small number of spirit brains, Qian Feng added. These 2 represented the thoughts of all the spirit sequencers present. Everyone looked at Li Daochong as if he was a layman. It's true that you've learned the long-lost qi healing method from the ancient times, and we've all heard about Li Daochong's glorious battle record of killing 2 senior magi the day before yesterday. However, this had nothing to do with spirit sequencers. Even if you were a soul formation almighty, it would be useless. Different professions are worlds apart. If you don't understand, you don't understand. Li Daochong had already expected this reaction. He simply explained, the equipment and manpower will increase along with the rescue work. Spirit brains will be sent over continuously. There will also be spirit sequencers among the rescued people. The speed of making spirit talismans will continue to increase. Tang Guangbei panicked. Nonsense, Li Daochong. Do you think you can make 100,000 spirit talismans just by relying on the number of people and equipment? Unless you have tens of thousands of spirit brains and recording devices, and more than 3,000 spirit sequencers working at the same time, you will barely have a chance of making 100,000 spirit talismans below level 7. Do you think the above 2 conditions are possible? Once Tang Guangbei asked this, everyone looked at Li Daochong. The latter shook his head lightly and said, both conditions are impossible. Everyone looked away from the lunatic, and confirmed that Li Daochong wasn't crazy. Tang Guangbei continued, then that's it. Moreover, even if you can do it, 100,000 level 7 spirit talismans are useless. Level 7 spirit talismans can at most deal with green ghost level dark ghosts. If they can't even deal with malicious ghosts, what's the point of having more? Li Daochong's expression didn't change much. He only said, I'm talking about 100,000 level 12 spirit talismans. Hat? What? What the F***? Tang Guangbei almost stumbled and fell to the ground. Everyone looked at Li Daochong as if they were looking at an idiot. 100,000 level 12 spirit talismans? Did he think they were made of paper? That he could make them just like that? A bead of sweat dripped down Yu Yan's beautiful face. Although she didn't know much about making spirit talismans, she knew what a level 12 spirit talisman meant. It was impossible to make 100,000 level 12 spirit talismans without using all the power of a third-class cultivation planet, let alone in 2 days. Making a level 7 spirit talisman and a level 12 spirit talisman were 2 completely different concepts. It was similar to the difference between making a bicycle and a car. From a technical point of view, it was more difficult. A powerful third-class spirit sequencer could make a level 7 spirit talisman independently. A second-class spirit sequencer was at the entry level. A level 12 spirit talisman was the requirement for a first-class spirit sequencer. There were as many third-class spirit sequencers as there were hairs on a cow. Second-class spirit sequencers could be seen everywhere. The number of first-class spirit sequencers decreased sharply. This was a dividing line. The difficulty of making spirit talismans above level 10 would increase sharply and become an insurmountable obstacle for many spirit sequencers. All the major cultivation companies in the Federation were fighting for first-class spirit sequencers. Spirit sequencers could not only make spirit talismans, but also program spirit sequencers. Tang Guangbei stared at Li Daochong with his old eyes. He had just made 100,000 spirit talismans according to the standard of a level 7 spirit talisman. Level 12 spirit talismans were another matter. Are you crazy? How is it possible to make 100,000 level 12 spirit talismans? Even if you turn the entire demon-subduing city upside down, you won't be able to find 3,000 first-class spirit sequencers. Other than the military personnel, there aren't many spirit sequencers on 13 Specter because they don't need to come to such a dangerous place to make money. Li Daochong turned a blind eye to Tang Guangbei's intense reaction and shrugged with a smile. Aren't you here? Tang Guangbei's face turned red and he said regretfully, I'm here to find something. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come to this damned place even if I was beaten to death. Tang Guangbei felt that something was wrong and said, Li Daoyu, your vision is good, but with all due respect, it's impossible for you to produce 1,000 level 12 spirit talismans in 2 days, let alone 100,000. Li Daochong laughed. If it's just 1,000, why would I need your help? I can do it myself. Tang Guangbei and Qian Feng looked at each other in dismay, then the two of them laughed out loud at the same time. Ha ha, Li Daoyu, your joke is a little too much. 1,000 level 12 spirit talismans in 2 days? Do you think it's magic? Tang Guangbei did not believe it at all. Li Daochong did not refute and only said, I didn't ask you to come here to produce spirit talismans. You only need to mix the materials and input the spirit sequence I made into the spirit brain. With that, Li Daochong moved. The 65 spirit brains had already been activated. Li Daochong's hands tapped on the keyboard as fast as lightning, and his psychokinesis and spirit energy were intertwined together and input into the spirit brain. The 1,000 sound escape was not only useful for escape techniques, but also for hand speed and footwork. In less than 10 seconds, Li Daochong had already completed the spirit sequence. You only need to mix the materials and then use the recording device to produce the spirit talismans. Tang Guangbei did not believe it at all. He wanted to expose Li Daochong and walked to one of the spirit brains. Tang Guangbei had the materials for level 12 spirit talismans with him. As a first-grade spirit sequencer, all kinds of materials were necessary. Tang Guangbei took out the ready-made materials and dripped them into the recording device. He pressed the confirm button and the recording device immediately started working. Qian Feng's feelings were exactly the same as Tang Guangbei's. How could a level 12 spirit talisman's spirit sequence be produced so quickly? An experienced first-grade spirit sequencer would need at least a week to produce a level 12 spirit talisman's spirit sequence. A special grade spirit sequencer would need 1 or 2 days. Only a 1-star spirit sequencer would be able to produce a level 12 spirit talisman's spirit sequence in a short time. However, it was also impossible to be as fast as Li Daochong, who had more than 60 spirit brains working together to program the spirit base. He seemed to have used some kind of method and was extremely fast. It was completed in the blink of an eye. However, this was not something rare. Qian Feng had once seen a special-grade spirit sequencer who could also do this. However, that special-grade spirit sequencer had only produced level 6 spirit talismans. Qian Feng did not believe that Li Daochong could produce a level 12 spirit talisman's spirit sequence in an instant even though he had seen it with his own eyes. He thought that Li Daochong was just putting on an act for the sake of his reputation. It would be good enough if the spirit sequence he produced was able to produce a level 3 spirit talisman. A few minutes later, a spirit talisman was produced. Tang Guangbei sneered and took out the spirit talisman. Just as he was about to comment and expose the fraud, the old man took a look at the spirit talisman and fell to the ground with a plop. His old eyes were wide open as he looked at the spirit talisman in disbelief. Chapter 473. A Level 12 Talisman. It was really a Level 12 talisman. Furthermore, the spirit paths of the talisman were much more exquisite than normal Level 12 talismans. Tang Guangbei's face twitched as his view of the world collapsed bit by bit. The talisman in his hand was a strengthened Level 12 talisman. It could cause some damage to woo ghosts and kill soul-devouring ghosts instantly. Qian Feng's mouth twitched. He was more shocked than Tang Guangbei. As a first-grade Yuanying spirit sequencer, Qian Feng could also create Level 12 talismans. However, he needed at least 2 days to create a complete spirit sequence. Li Daochong only used a few seconds to complete it. How was that possible? Even though he saw it with his own eyes, Qian Feng still couldn't believe it. It was too unbelievable. Tang Guangbei and Qian Feng's reactions explained everything. Only now did everyone realize that Li Daochong wasn't bragging. He was serious from the start. Elder Tang, is it really a Level 12 talisman? A Jin Dan spirit sequencer stuttered. It's the real deal. Tang Guangbei's hand that was holding the talisman trembled slightly. He looked at Li Daochong with a pair of old eyes that were filled with shock and excitement. How old was he? He didn't look like he was 20 years old, but at most he was 20 years old. He was already so accomplished in battle, spirit sequences, and healing. Moreover, he wasn't just an ordinary person. He was someone who could overturn common sense. He couldn't be described as a genius anymore. Even a monster would pale in comparison. Tang Guangbei's disdain for Li Daochong disappeared and was replaced with respect. Tang Guangbei couldn't remain calm in front of someone who was dozens of years younger than him but had dozens of times higher attainments in spirit sequences. Li Daoyu, tell us what you need us to do. I will do my best to cooperate. Tang Guangbei was helped up by the other cultivators and expressed his attitude with a serious face. Regardless of whether he could create 100,000 Level 12 talismans in 2 days, Li Daochong's display of skill made all the arguments unimportant. Tang Guangbei's pride as a special-grade spirit sequencer was nothing in front of this young man. Qian Feng also said, Li Daoyu, I sincerely apologize for doubting you just now. We showed off our slight skills in front of an expert. Please tell us what you need us to do. Li Daochong said indifferently, It's fine. May I know your names? What level of spirit sequencer is he? Tang Guangbei, special grade spirit sequencer, Tang Guangbei said respectfully. Qian Feng, first grade spirit Qian, Qian Feng said. Tang Guangbei, spirit sequencer, spirit Qian Feng's spirit sequencer. Then I'll have to trouble the two of you to arrange the distribution of materials for the others. The materials we've collected are extremely limited. Most of the materials needed for the 12th level talisman are in the hands of the military. For the time being, I'll need everyone to take out their stocks and use them. Li Daochong immediately arranged. No problem. This old man still has some private stashes that should be able to create quite a number of level 12 talismans, Tang Guangbei nodded. Captain Yu, how many people can be mobilized now? Li Daochong turned to Yu Yan and asked. There are already more than 700 cultivators that can be mobilized, Yu Yan immediately replied. Yu Yan's professional instincts allowed her to do a good job in statistics. More than 700 people, that's enough. Every 10 people in a small group, expand the search and rescue area, and then allocate half of the people to gather all the spirit brain equipment that can be used. In addition, arrange another 10 groups of people to look for materials in the demon-subduing city without caring about anything. I'll give you a list later, and let them collect according to the list. Yu Yen didn't know why, but an indescribable excitement welled up in her heart. Her depressed mood suddenly brightened up. Yu Yen seemed to have seen a glimmer of hope in resisting the million-strong ghost army. This hope that she didn't dare to think about before was given to her by this young man in front of her. Yu Yen immediately turned around and quickly made the arrangements. Every cultivator knew what would happen in 2 days. There was no safe place on 13 Specter. If they wanted to live, everyone had to work together. Otherwise, they would die without a doubt. Although many cultivators were puzzled by Yu Yan's arrangements, it was not very wise to save people and collect equipment and materials at this time. However, because of Li Daochong's existence, no one refuted anything. Their lives were saved by him, so there was nothing to say. Like worker bees, the cultivators performed their duties under Yu Yan's arrangement. The increase in manpower greatly increased the speed of the search and rescue work. Injured people were constantly being transported back from demon-subduing city, and the hall on the first floor was quickly filled. This time, the number of people was even more than the first wave. There were more than 2,000 people. However, the cultivation of this wave of cultivators was not very high. There was not a single Yuanian cultivator, and the highest was only at the peak of Jindan. 90% of them were foundation establishment cultivators. Seeing that it was about time, Li Daochong immediately began the treatment. With the experience from last time, Li Daochong was obviously much more proficient this time. Half an hour later, the death aura in the bodies of more than 2,000 cultivators was completely expelled. Li Daochong once again fell into a weak state. "Xiaochong, are you all right?" Seeing Li Daochong's weak expression, Yu Yen asked worriedly. "I'm fine." Li Daochong waved his hand and replied. He quietly left the temporary building through the back door. Yu Yan's beautiful eyes flashed with a strange light. Previously, Li Daochong was extremely weak after the treatment, but he went out for a trip. When he returned, his aura had recovered as if nothing had happened. It was very difficult for cultivators at the 13 Specter to recover their strength. It would take at least a few days for them to completely recover. If they had a true treasure-grade recovery medicine, it would greatly shorten the time, but it would still take half a day. What method did Li Daochong use to completely recover his spirit qi in such a short time? Yu Yen couldn't understand. Looking at Li Daochong's disappearing figure, she felt that it was even more mysterious. This time, Li Daochong only went out for a short time. All the high-level dark ghosts in a straight line were instantly killed. As long as there was no Grand Wizard, Li Daochong could use his spirit sun lightning to instantly kill all dark ghosts below the high-level witch ghost level. The number of dark ghosts in the northwestern city was greatly reduced by Li Daochong's cleaning. Half an hour later, Li Daochong returned to the temporary building and recovered under Yu Yan's astonished gaze. Yu Yan's jaw almost dropped. She really wanted to ask Li Daochong what he had done while he was gone. If all the cultivators fighting dark ghosts had Li Daochong's recovery speed, their fighting strength would greatly increase. But Yu Yan knew that everyone had secrets they didn't want others to know. Li Daochong's secrets were just a little more numerous. Some things couldn't be asked. Yu Yan still had this bit of awareness, so she could only suppress her restless curiosity. Yu Yan wasn't the only one who noticed this question. Any cultivator with a bit of awareness would be curious. The cultivators who came later didn't know what the relationship between Yu Yan and Li Daochong was. They only knew that the two of them were the first and second masters of this place. Because Yu Yan was wearing a special military robe, one could tell at a glance that she was a military officer in the cultivation army. The cultivators all guessed that Li Daochong was a high-ranking general in the army and Yu Yan's superior. The two of them should have a superior-subordinate relationship. Thus, many cultivators ran over to Yu Yan to ask how Li Daochong had recovered his spiritual energy in such a short time. At first, Yu Yan bluntly retorted, but with so many people asking, she couldn't dodge them. Thus, Yu Yan made up a very reasonable explanation. The secret medicine of the army is still in the research and development stage. General Li used his body to test it, so there will be side effects. With your little cultivation, you'll die without a doubt if you take one. Using the cultivation army as a shield, the number of cultivators who came to ask questions quickly decreased. Everyone spread the news in private faster than a virus. Li Daochong's image was raised another level in everyone's minds. Thus, the name of General Li spread. To be able to obtain the rank of general, his position in the cultivation army was obviously not low. Half a day later, more than 5,000 people were rescued. Li Daochong repeatedly took action 3 times, and then went out for a trip. The rest of the time, he was in the temporary talisman production room on the 3rd floor. At this time, the number of spirit brains had increased from more than 60 to more than 600. With more manpower, the speed of searching became faster. Every cultivator moved like a worker bee, and their efficiency was extremely high. In fact, there was an even more important reason. For some reason, the number of nether ghosts in the northwest district of Demon Subduing City had plummeted, especially the high-level nether ghosts, which had almost disappeared. Without obstruction and danger, the search and rescue work and equipment would progress much faster. More than 600 spirit brains belonged to the million nano-talisman chip, which was enough to make level 12 talismans. The real problem was the materials to make level 12 talismans. If these materials were to be bought on an ordinary cultivation planet, it would be very difficult to buy them, and the price would be shockingly high. At that time, Li Daochong had spent a lot of money to collect them. The reason why these materials were expensive was mainly because of the military's control. After all, the power of talismans above level 10 was too great. If anyone could control them, it would be very dangerous and not beneficial to the Federation's government's rule. These materials were equivalent to dangerous munitions, and if they were not controlled, there would be trouble. However, the inventory of these materials in Demon Subduing City was still quite considerable. Because they had to fight against the nether ghosts, the control here would be much smaller. Hundreds of cultivators moved out together. After half a day, several tons of materials were transported back. Under Tang Guangbei's guidance, the allocation of materials went smoothly. This saved Li Daochong a lot of trouble. He only needed to program the spirit sequence. Spiritual base programming was an extremely tedious process, but Li Daochong enjoyed it and immersed himself in it. More than 600 spirit brains simultaneously programming the spirit base was an impossible task in anyone's eyes. Li Daochong, on the other hand, was at ease. To him, it was just a process that consumed his mind power and spirit energy. As for the spirit base programming itself, it was really nothing. Li Daochong had too many codes in his mind. Just by taking out a small game from his previous life, he could come up with thousands of different combinations and create a complete spirit sequence. In just 10 minutes, more than 600 level 12 enhanced spirit talismans were completed. After they were completed, these talismans would be kept by Yu Yan and the Vanguard team's combat cultivators. A portion of them would be kept by Li Daochong in case of emergencies. A day later, the number of injured people who were rescued began to decrease. The northwest city was a bit remote, and it was quite far from the center of the city. A total of 20,000 cultivators were saved. Under Li Daochong's treatment, these cultivators quickly became lively. Li Daochong did not rest for a moment. He had a lot of work to do. He had to treat the injured and program the spirit sequence. At first, Li Daochong was not used to it, but after he got used to it, he realized that his mind power and spirit energy could also increase. Unknowingly, this was also a kind of cultivation. It was a bit hard, But the consolidation effect of the spirit energy was extremely obvious. It was emptied time and time again, but it was filled again and again. Whether it was his body, mind power, or foundation, they were all improved during the entire process. Chapter 474. 2 days passed quickly. The building that Li Daochong chose was originally a disaster area in the northwest city. Now, not even a short ghost could be found here, and it had been cleaned up. This area had become the safest area in the demon-subduing city. Many cultivators who were fighting guerrilla warfare with the dark ghost naturally gathered here. In this way, other than the injured who were rescued, there were cultivators who spontaneously gathered here. Many of the active forces in the demon-subduing city gradually gathered near the temporary building. There were more than 50,000 people. Adding on the 20,000 injured who were rescued, the number quickly increased to 70,000. Only now did Yu Yan understand how powerful Li Daochong's actions of saving people were. However, other than the injured, the other cultivators who had spontaneously gathered were not integrated. Even the injured were not completely reorganized. Among them, the cultivators who were exiled to 13 Specter were only used as combat strength. These exiled people had different thoughts and were difficult to manage effectively. Li Daochong was even more unlikely to give them the talismans to use. Li Daochong didn't trust this group of cultivators. He didn't know if they would keep the talismans for themselves. Yu Yan also agreed with this, so in the end there were only 8,000 cultivators. It was not a lot, but it was enough. In the last half of the day, Li Daochong no longer treated the injured and focused on making talismans. As more and more people helped him, the number of spirit brains he found also increased. The speed of making talismans also increased, and the consumption of materials was calculated in tons. Li Daochong was not proficient in making level 12 talismans, but under such intensive spirit sequence programming, it did not take long for him to make great progress in making level 12 talismans. The spirit sequence masters were managed by Tang Guangbei and Qian Feng. The vanguard battle cultivators were Yu Yan, Ning Xiujie, Xiao Ying, and Ling Fei. Li Daochong was only in charge of the preparations, so he was not too tired. In 2 days, with Li Daochong as the core, a cultivation army of the level of a division was quickly established. Tang Guangbei witnessed the birth of 100,000 level 12 talismans with his own eyes. In fact, the final number of talismans produced was more than 123,800, which was more than 20,000 more than expected. When Tang Guangbei and Qian Feng were talking in private, Tang Guangbei praised, "This young man is amazing. He alone can take on 5 divisions." Qian Feng felt ashamed. "I am a cultivator of Yuanying. I am ashamed." During this period of time, the Northwest Stronghold was also making preparations. Under the command of Qin Zhan, everyone in the command building was armed to the teeth. All of the resources that Chu Tianqi had brought had been used effectively. The defensive spiritual arrays had been replaced, and a 1-kilometer radius of the command building had been covered by a defensive barrier. The more than 2,000 cultivators were divided into 3 battalion-sized units, each on standby. Tens of thousands of steel puppets were ready for battle. Combat shuttles were hidden all over the building. Once the ghost army appeared, they would soar into the sky. More than 500 spirit light cannons were aimed at the sky. The outside world did not know what was happening in demon-subduing city. While the Rakshasa state mobilized the ghost army, they cut off 13 Specter's connection with the outside world. This place became a sealed space. If they wanted to send a message out, they could only send people to escape from 13 Specter. In fact, the temporary building that Li Daochong found was not very far from the Northwest Stronghold. It was only 25 kilometers away in a straight line. However, because the terrain of 13 Specter was complicated and had experienced hundreds of years of war, the ground was no longer flat. It showed a wavy hilly terrain. Not to mention 25 kilometers, it was difficult to see within a few kilometers. Psychic power was also compressed. If they did not come in person, they would not be able to sense the movements 25 kilometers away. After the defensive spiritual array was activated, all the cultivators of the Northwest stronghold gathered inside the array. No one took a step out. Just like that, 3 days passed quickly. Far away, outside Fengdu City, Cherry Blossom Gauze stood on a black cloud with a cold expression. Intercourse stood respectfully behind her. Intercourse's injuries had healed, but the fear in his heart could not be cured. When he thought of Li Daochong's spirit sun lightning, the wizard core in his body would tremble violently. That young man was too terrifying. In Intercourse's opinion, no one in the Rakshas Estate's Grand Wizard stationed on 13 Specter was his match. 3 days ago, when Intercourse learned that Wu Ho was going to gather 1 million ghost army to kill demon subduing city, he was conflicted. In a war, the strength of an army was important, but whether it was cultivators or ghosts, once their strength reached a certain level, it would be useless. For example, a high-level Grand Wizard. If the cultivators did not send out a semi-god realm cultivator to resist, it would be useless. A high-level Grand Wizard could even kill 100,000 cultivators with a wave of his hand. Of course, that was under the premise that the cultivators did not use spirit light weapons. In Intercourse's opinion, as long as Li Daochong was there, 1 million ghost army might not be able to completely invade demon subduing city. However, when Cherry Blossom Gauze personally came to 13 Specter, Intercourse's doubts were completely dispelled. That human cultivator kid was finished. Intercourse could not help but feel that it was a pity. If the Federation nurtured such a good talent well, he would become the biggest stumbling block in Rakshas Estate in the future. It was a pity that he had angered Wu Ho before he had grown up. Now no one could save him. Intercourse later, more than 20 Grand Wizard wore wizard armor and held wizard treasures in their hands. Soul-devouring spear, soul-locking whip, morning staff, and soul-summoning banner were all present. Behind the more than 20 Grand Wizards stood nearly 10,000 Wu ghost army. Behind them was a black mass of soul-catcher ghosts and an uncountable number of malicious spirits. On the ground, the ghost beast army was ferocious. Thousands of Balrog crocodiles were breathing like a tide. The king of Kukui sat on the Balrog crocodile, his pair of empty eyes burning with dark red flames. In midair, 3,000 rotten dragons carried Wang Sha's soldiers and constantly roared. They could no longer hold back their madness, and wished that they could rush into demon subduing city and tear all the human cultivators inside to pieces. Cherry Blossom Gauze glanced at the distance. A black light soared into the sky. The ghost army gathered outside demon subduing city had already launched an attack. Cherry Blossom Gauze's lips curled up slightly. She looked in the direction of demon subduing city with an ice-cold expression. Li Daochong, you made this queen spend so much for you alone and changed the battle plan of the entire war. You can be considered the #1 person in the Federation. Today, no matter what, I will drag you out and skin you alive. How many good things have you ruined for this queen? I will settle all the old debts with you today. Let's go. Cherry Blossom Gauze gave the order. Intercourse immediately activated a black compass in her hand and gently twisted it. Rolling black clouds enveloped all the army. For a moment, the ghost army was engulfed in the black clouds, and then the black clouds rolled forward like a wave. The black clouds didn't seem to move fast, but if you blinked and looked again, the black clouds would still disappear. Under the lead of Cherry Blossom Gauze, this wave of ghost army from Fengdu City surged towards demon subduing city. However, this wasn't the entire ghost army. There were a total of 5 legions attacking demon subduing city. Cherry Blossom Gauze led the main force. The other 4 legions had already gathered outside the 4 gates of demon subduing city a day ago. They were led by 4 intermediate Grand Wizard ghost commanders. Each legion had thousands of Wu ghost army, several grand wizards, and hundreds of thousands of various ghost armies and ghost beasts. The nether ghosts of the nether ghost body were like grasshoppers crossing the border, surrounding the demon-subduing city in 3 layers. Even bacteria could not escape. The first to be attacked was the east gate of demon-subduing city. This was the stronghold of the 24th Division of the 13 Specter Cultivation Army. It had more than 10,000 cultivators and all kinds of powerful spiritual light weapons. However, in the face of such a huge ghost army, the hearts of every cultivator in the East Gate were trembling. It wasn't that they were afraid, but that such a scale of battle had never appeared before. What was the reason for the Rakshasa state to suddenly launch such a fierce attack? None of the cultivator soldiers could figure it out. Of course, there was no time for them to think about it. They could only fight. When the ghost army was within 10 kilometers, Wei Kuan, the commander of the 24th Division in the East Gate's command building, immediately gave the order to open fire. Hundreds of spiritual light cannons shot out at the same time. The thousands of nether ghosts in the front row of the ghost army were blown away by this round of spiritual light cannons. However, the spiritual light cannons needed time to accumulate energy. After one shot, they had to wait for more than 10 seconds before they could fire again. At this moment, the ground was shaking violently. The cups on the table were shaking violently, making rattling sounds that shook people's hearts. Outside the East Gate, thousands of Balrog crocodiles roared and rushed over. The king of Kukui, who was sitting on the back of the Balrog crocodiles, was holding the death spirit whip in his hand and constantly whipping the crocodiles back. The Balrog crocodiles' eyes were red. Black flames spurted out from their nostrils from time to time. The strong smell of living souls in the air made them almost go crazy. So rays of light shot out from the East Gate. During the interval of the spiritual light cannons, spiritual talismans became the best long-range attack. Fire talismans, ice talismans, and thunder talismans shot out from the city wall. Boom, boom, boom. The fire talismans exploded on the ground. The Balrog crocodiles were only knocked down by the explosion. They quickly got up and continued to sprint. Crack, crack, crack. The ice talismans hit the Balrog crocodiles and immediately froze them into ice sculptures. However, when the Balrog crocodiles spat out black flames from their nostrils, the ice sculptures immediately melted. Crack. The thunder talisman was perhaps the only way to cause damage to the Balrog crocodile war cavalry. One of the Balrog crocodiles was hit by the thunder talisman. Its scales were immediately charred black, and it let out a painful roar. However, it was only a little pain. The burns on its scales did not affect the Balrog crocodile's fighting strength too much. The level of these spiritual talismans was too low. They were only level 8 and there were not many of them. They only caused a little hindrance to the charging army of Balrog crocodiles. The damage was minimal. Thousands of spiritual talismans were shot out, but only one unlucky Balrog crocodile was killed. It was trampled into meat paste by the charging Balrog crocodiles behind it. After the first shot at the East Gate, the ghost army at the south gate of the demon-subduing city also launched an attack. Soon after, the west gate was also attacked. Naturally, the north gate would not be forgotten. Chapter 475. The number of ghost soldiers at the north gate of demon-subduing city was more than double that of the other 3 gates. The victorious army gave orders again and again with rough roars. All the equipment that could be used at the north gate stronghold had already been used. 300 spirit light cannons were fired in sequence, with 100 cannons in a group. This could greatly reduce the gap time. The consumption of elementary spirit stones was calculated in tons. The 12,000 soldiers guarding the north gate had already gathered and were divided into 3 groups in the square behind the north gate. When all the weapons were used up, it was time for them to fight with the bayonets. Every time the spirit light cannons were fired, a large number of green ghosts and malicious ghosts would be killed. The Balrog crocodile cavalry charging from the ground would also be blown to pieces. The king of Kukui would also not be able to escape death. However, no matter how the spirit light cannons were fired, the ghost army behind would still charge forward dauntlessly. This was the ghost army's usual trick, but the human cultivators were helpless. They had no other choice but to exhaust as much as possible. The ghost army had never been afraid of death. When a war broke out, the low-level dark ghosts would be completely controlled by the Grand Wizard Ghost. They were like puppets. The spirit light cannons were the human cultivator's trump card when dealing with a large number of ghost soldiers and powerful witch ghosts. Only the Grand Wizard Ghost could effectively resist it. Below the witch ghosts, a single cannon could kill a large number of them. However, the cost of firing a spirit light cannon was extremely high. It required 100,000 elementary spirit stones. In other words, if 100 spirit light cannons were fired at the same time, 10 million elementary spirit stones would be gone. Every time they fired, the victorious army would feel pain. After more than 10 cannons, more than 100 million elementary spirit stones would evaporate. The damage to the ghost army was not small, but there were too many of them. 300 spirit light cannons were fired one after another, but it was impossible to effectively stop the ghost army from advancing. Especially the rotten dragon cavalry in the air. Other than spirit talismans and sniper rifles, all other spiritual weapons were useless against them. Although the spirit light cannons were powerful, they were very clumsy and difficult to hit targets in the air. The rotten dragon naturally could not withstand a single cannon, but it was useless if it could not hit it. In order to avoid waste, the spirit light cannons were all aimed at the ground. The rotten dragon in the air only used spirit talismans and spirit sniper rifles to stop them. However, the level of the talisman was too low, so it was very difficult to kill the rotting dragon. The spirit sniper rifle's power and effect were the best. A single shot from the spirit sniper rifle could cause a rotten dragon's head to explode. However, the cost of a single shot from the spirit sniper rifle was even more expensive than a spirit light cannon. One sniper could only equip 50 spirit energy magnetic field bullets, and that was the limit. The victorious army saw that the ghost army was about to reach the city walls. He raised his penetrating rainbow spear and cursed, "Brothers, let's chop them up together with this father. All long-range cultivators, support the brothers in close combat at any time." Facing the enemy head-on was the last move that the ever-victorious army could use. The soldiers of the other 3 gates also faced the ghost army head-on. In the face of such a terrifying number of ghost armies, the previous depletion did not seem to be effective. However, after this wave of attacks, 1/3 of the ghost army was killed, and some of the witch ghosts had fallen. The invention of the spirit sniper rifle had become a nightmare for high-level dark ghosts. The spirit snake antimaterial sniper rifle, which was the latest developed by the Federation, was equipped with high-explosive spirit energy magnetic bullet. With one shot it could reduce a Grand Wizard's head to dust. However, the self-cultivator army on 13 Specter had yet to be equipped with such an advanced spirit sniper rifle. Level 15 spirit talismans were the highest allocation of the demon-subduing city's garrison. The number of spirit talismans was extremely limited, and each army corps did not have more than 5 of them. The victorious army only had 2 left, and they had already used 3 of them. Outside the north gate of the demon-subduing city, 12,000 soldiers split into 3 groups and flew out. All kinds of magic treasures displayed their abilities, and the cold light of their weapons illuminated the void. Dozens of combat shuttles rushed into the sky and engaged in a chaotic battle with the rotting dragon cavalry. The last 100 or so steel puppets of the North Gate stronghold all came out. These steel puppets became the last barrier to block the Balrog crocodile's tank cavalry on the ground. Once the steel puppets were broken through, The self-cultivator army could only use their flesh and blood to block the Balrog crocodile. There were also cavalry in the self-cultivator army. Hundreds of motorized shuttles were ready to go, and the motorized shuttles were equipped with spirit light guns. There were also more than 10 armored shuttles in front. Once the steel puppets were broken through, these armored shuttles would charge into the group of Balrog crocodiles. War was cruel no matter where it was. The ghost army was like a tide. More than 100 steel puppets could only defeat the first batch of Balrog crocodiles charging at the front. Soon, they were defeated by more Balrog crocodiles charging from behind. The king of Kukui lashed out with his whip, and a steel puppet was split in half. However, just as the king of Kukui withdrew his whip, another steel puppet descended from the sky and stomped on the head of its mount. The puppet then punched the king of Kukui in the face and sent him flying. A hoarse metallic roar came from the steel puppet's throat. However, just as the sound came out, a ball of black flame spurted out from its back, instantly corroding its surface and turning it black. The steel puppet turned around and pounced on the Balrog crocodile that had ambushed it. It hugged the crocodile and its chest flashed. Boom! It self-detonated. It perished together with the Balrog crocodile and the king of Kukui, who was sitting on top of it. In the blink of an eye, more than 100 steel puppets had completed their mission. The number of Balrog crocodile war cavalry did not seem to have decreased much. The armored shuttles charged into the group of Balrog crocodiles at full speed. Immediately after, the motorized shuttles flew over at high speed behind the armored shuttles. In the air and on the ground, a battle broke out. Explosions, roars, and ghost howls rose and fell in all directions of the demon-subduing city. From time to time, cultivators would fall. Faced with the ghost army that had an overwhelming advantage, none of the soldiers of the cultivation army retreated. Every cultivator knew in their hearts that there was no way out. They could either fight or die. From the moment they stepped onto the scorched earth of 13 Specter, they knew that this day would come sooner or later. No, from the day they joined the army, they knew that this day would come. Every cultivator had a story that no one knew. Perhaps some of them did it for cultivation resources, but even so, they were forced to do it. Born in this era, every cultivator had to have the awareness to face the Nether Ghost. There was no way to hide. Even if you chose to escape, one day you would still encounter the Nether Ghosts, because as long as they still existed, they would not let go of any living creature with vitality. Humans were afraid of death, and cultivators were even more afraid of death. Cultivation was originally to pursue a longer lifespan and perhaps heaven-defying strength. However, in the face of the life and death of the entire race, everything became unimportant. All the extinct races of the human race were the best examples. However, at this moment, the number of cultivators in the demon-subduing city was too small. Due to the Rakshasa state's large-scale attack in the border area, the Federation was unable to send any more troops to support the 13 Specter. At this moment, all the cultivators on 13 Specter could only rely on themselves. Facing the large number of ghost armies that were crazily attacking, the cultivators fought bravely, but they were still defeated very quickly. Rivers of blood flowed in all 4 directions of the demon-subduing city. The towering city walls that had experienced a baptism more than a month ago could no longer hold on and collapsed one after another. The demon-subduing city was in the greatest crisis since its establishment. Seeing the soldiers fall one by one, the highest-ranking generals of the 4 main gates had no choice but to give the order to retreat. The remaining soldiers retreated to the last stronghold in the city, which was also a place that had to be defended. Those strongholds hid the great formation of the entire demon-subduing city. Once it was broken, the demon-subduing city would completely fall. After killing a Grand Wizard, the commander of the North Gate, the victorious army, led the remaining 5,000 cultivators and retreated in the direction of the northwest stronghold. As early as when the war broke out, Qin Zhan had sent several sentries to investigate. Every move of the North Gate was under his control. Seeing the cultivators fall one by one, Qin Zhan really wanted to support them, but he only had a total of 2,000 soldiers under him, so he was unable to provide support. If he sent support, the northwest stronghold would be empty. If the ghost army launched a sneak attack, he would be dumbfounded. The only thing he could do was to guard the northwest stronghold and wait. The victorious army only decided to retreat after receiving the message from Qin Zhan. Otherwise, with his personality, he would fight until he died. After entering the protective shield of the northwest stronghold, more than 5,000 cultivators temporarily got a chance to breathe. The victorious army was still cursing and swearing, wanting to fight. It was just that his body was covered in blood, and one of his arms had been blackened, so his fighting strength had been greatly reduced. However, if it weren't for the 5 soldiers holding him together, this bad-tempered general would definitely return to the ghost army after confirming that more than 5,000 soldiers had arrived safely. Motherf **Ker, let me go, let me kill a few more ghost bastards bah. The victorious army kept swearing and waving the penetrating rainbow spear in his hand. General Chang, if you still want to fight, you should go and heal your wounds first. I have prepared the newly developed Type 003 top-grade spirit liquid for you. Your injuries should be able to heal in 3 hours. Qin Zhan came over and saw the victorious army acting like a mad dog. He couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. This guy's temperament had not changed for so many years. He didn't know how he had survived for so many years on the front line. Seeing Qin Zhan, the victorious army's mood eased a little. However, when he saw Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin, who came with Qin Zhan, the victorious army was stunned. Divine generals? The victorious army did not receive any notice that 13 Specter had come to the divine generals. Chu Tianqi, why are you here? The victorious army was not interested in the divine generals at all. He was also a member of the divine generals. Later, because he was old and could not break through to the divine transformation realm, he withdrew from the divine generals. In the last few years of the divine generals, Chu Tianqi had just joined the divine generals, so the two knew each other. As for Kong Lanxin, the victorious army did not know her. The president asked me to come, so I came. Chu Tianqi shrugged. Motherf **Ker, why didn't you tell us that you were coming? I was ready to fight to the death. If I knew that the divine generals would send people, I wouldn't have arranged the battle strategy like this. The victorious army could not help but feel angry when he thought of thousands of his brothers who had just died. General Chang, Lanxin and I are here to assassinate the Grand Wizard. The higher-ups have ordered us not to reveal any information. President Yu has personally ordered us not to. If you have any objections, you can go to the president's palace to complain. There's no use yelling at me. I'm just following orders. Chu Tianqi did not care about the victorious army's abuse and replied indifferently. General Chang, now is not the time to argue about this. The most important thing right now is to heal your wounds. Qin Zhan frowned slightly. He was a little dissatisfied with the victorious army's temper. Although the victorious army had a bad temper, they were not insensible. They glared at Chu Tianqi and snorted coldly. Then, they entered the command building under the guidance of a young officer. Master Qin, it's time for us to make a move. Chu Tianqi looked at the ghost army that was charging from afar, and said with a cold expression. Qin Zhan nodded and waved his hand. Fire! Hundreds of the latest spiritual light cannons that Chu Tianqi brought were fired at the same time. After a round of bombardment, the ghost army suffered casualties. Even the Balrog crocodile tank army suffered heavy losses. It was rare for the ghost army to be in chaos. The new spiritual light cannons shortened the charging time, but the consumption of each shot was greater. The ghost army on the ground was temporarily blocked, but the carrion flying mounts in the air were still charging over. Spiritual talismans, fire! Qin Zhan ordered again. More than 2,000 soldiers took out a spiritual talisman at the same time and shot it into the air. The spiritual talismans that Chu Tianqi brought were all level 10 spiritual talismans. They were much more powerful than level 8 spiritual talismans. The carrion flying mounts in the air had always been in an advantageous position. They suffered the least casualties among the charging ghost army. When they were charging at the north gate, level 8 spiritual talismans could not cause much damage to them. It was also because of this that the cultivator army suffered a great loss. When the spiritual light beams shot over, the carrion flying mounts did not take them seriously. Wang Sha's soldiers even laughed mockingly. They were amused by the dying struggles of these human cultivators. Boom! With a loud sound, a carrion flying mounts was hit by a spiritual talisman. Before it could even scream, it was engulfed by flames and burned to ashes. Then, there were continuous explosions, and the air was in chaos. At this time, the carrion flying mounts realized that the situation was not right. The spiritual talismans this time were much more powerful than before. However, it was too late to react. More than 2,000 spiritual talismans were fired, and the carrion flying mounts were too close. They could not dodge at all. For a moment, a rain of carrion flying mounts fell from the sky. The carrion flying mounts fell to the ground one by one, and Wang Sha's soldiers were engulfed by flames. The carrion flying mounts that were hit directly would be burned to ashes, and the aftermath would still cause damage to the carrion flying mounts nearby. With just a round of spiritual talisman attacks, half of the carrion flying mounts were shot down. The remaining carrion flying mounts retreated frantically. They did not dare to approach the northwest stronghold, and floated more than 10 kilometers away. The carrion flying mounts were the first ghost army to arrive, and the malicious ghosts followed closely behind. When they arrived, the entire sky turned dark, and the ghosts flying everywhere looked eerie and terrifying. Steel puppets move out. At Qin Zhan's order, tens of thousands of steel puppets that were lying in ambush rushed into the sky like a tide, and rushed into the crowd of malicious ghosts. The runes on the steel puppets that were 3 meters tall flickered. Every time they flickered, they would bring out a round of spiritual energy. The malicious ghosts could not withstand a single blow from the steel puppets and were quickly defeated. However, the number of soul-catcher ghosts that followed closely behind was still huge. Among them, there were dozens of soul-catcher ghost kings that had attained the dark form, and they could fight head-on with the Jin Dan level steel puppets. However, with the support of the long-range cultivators in the stronghold, the soul-catcher ghosts could not withstand the steel army. Qin Zhan stood in the building of the stronghold and watched the steel army defeat the ghost army. However, there was no joy on his face. Instead, he became more solemn. In the sky, thousands of Wu ghost army and a few grand wizard looked down. They had not made a move yet, but 1/3 of the steel puppets had been destroyed by the combined attack of the soul-catcher ghosts and the carrion flying mounts. A roar came from the dark clouds in the sky, and a giant ghost beast that was more than 100 meters tall broke out of the clouds. 3-headed dead spirit python. 1, 2, 3. Chapter 476. Qin Zhan's expression was extremely unsightly. The Rakshasa state had really put in a lot of effort this time, even sending out Wu ghost-level ghost beasts. The 3-headed dead spirit python was more powerful than a high-level Wu ghost. Its skin was thick and its body was huge, so it could withstand the bombardment of spiritual light cannons. This kind of high-level ghost beast was rare in the Rakshasa state. To be able to gather hundreds of them, it could be seen that the Rakshasa state was determined to take down the demon-subduing city. Above the void, on a dark warship, several grand wizards stood at the bow. One of the grand wizards was not as tall and sturdy as the other grand wizards. Instead, he was close to a human, less than 2 meters tall. Compared to the grand wizards who were close to 3 meters tall, he was like a child. However, the few senior magi respectfully stood behind this smaller senior magus, who looked more like a human being than a human being. Apang Yi, the leader of all the grand wizards in the Rakshasa state on 13 Specter, a high-level grand wizard. He was ranked in the top 30 on the Rakshasa state's grand wizard list. According to the calculation of the cultivator's cultivation, Apang Yi was equivalent to an expert in the early stage of the divine transformation realm. He was a godlike existence in the Federation. Apang Yi and Qin Zhan, one in the air and one on the ground, looked at each other across the air. They were old rivals. The two of them had fought more than 100 times on the frontline battlefield. Qin Zhan had an absolute advantage with 61 wins and 39 losses. However, in most of the battles, Apang Yi did not directly appear. 80% of them were harassment battles, which were arranged by the Rakshasa state to attract the elites of the Federation. Therefore, Qin Zhan's 61 wins were a lot exaggerated. In fact, it was Apang Yi who won without fighting. Therefore, overall, there was not much difference between the battle results of the man and the wizard. After all, Qin Zhan was only a Jin Dan cultivator. It was not easy for him to defeat Apang Yi, which was equivalent to facing a divine transformation realm cultivator. No matter how elite Qin Zhan's troops were, there was no way they could contend against a high-level grand wizard head-on. They had to rely on tactics and all kinds of powerful spiritual equipment, as well as heavenly arcane true treasures. In Apang Yi's heart, Qin Zhan was one of the most dangerous human cultivators. Qin Zhan's strength was limited, and he could kill Qin Zhan easily. However, once this human cultivator had a group of warriors and equipment, his danger level would increase exponentially. The battle at the front line 2 years ago left a deep impression on Apang Yi. Qin Zhan led 5,000 cultivators and drove 3 space shuttles to confront Apang Yi, who had an army of 50,000. Judging from the strength of both sides, Apang Yi had the absolute advantage in this battle. He could easily crush Qin Zhan's army and capture Qin Zhan alive. However, Qin Zhan had left all 3 space shuttles empty, luring the ghost army into the space shuttles. Apang Yi could understand why he had left one space shuttle empty. At that time, he had also predicted that Qin Zhan would play dirty. It was just that Apang Yi had never expected that Qin Zhan would go all out and take the risk of floating in the vast starry sky with 5,000 cultivators in space shuttle cars, rescue shuttles, and landing shuttles. Qin Zhan was swift and decisive. As soon as Apang Yi's ghost army entered the space shuttles, Qin Zhan immediately detonated them. The power was earth-shattering. More than 80% of the ghost army was wiped out, and even the witchcraft ghosts suffered heavy casualties. What Apang Yi didn't expect was that Qin Zhan's troops didn't flee. Instead, they returned to attack the ghost army head-on. Qin Zhan had 2 spirit snipers by his side. The intelligence also showed that he was carrying 2 level 18 spirit talismans and a peak-level Yuanying steel puppet. There was also the Zhanlu sword. At that time, Apang Yi was mad with anger. However, facing Qin Zhan, who was right in front of him, he didn't dare to capture him personally. Apang Yi couldn't determine the position of the 2 spirit snipers. The peak-level Yuanying steel puppet stood majestically behind Qin Zhan. The 2 level 18 spirit talismans were also one of the reasons why Apang Yi didn't dare to act rashly. The reason why the human race couldn't take them down was because of their varied and unpredictable spirit machine weapons and magic treasures. If they only fought with brute force, the Hades would have destroyed the human race long ago. However, the problem was the human cultivators' incomparably strong soft power. More than half of the entire spirit realm had been devoured by the Hades. Countless races had been wiped out. Even the tyrannical demon race hadn't been spared. However, they had stumbled in front of the human race, which didn't seem very strong. Now, those powerful races that were almost wiped out were gradually recovering under the protection of the human race. What the Hades were most worried about was that these races would join forces with the human race after recovering some of their vitality. In that case, the Hades's wish to completely devour the spirit realm would probably fail. Qin Zhan had wiped out Apang Ye's army of 50,000 with only 5,000 troops, which made the latter feel resentful. Apang Yi couldn't forget the scene of him retreating in a sorry state that day. If he hadn't retreated, Apang Yi suspected that he might have been killed by Qin Zhan, the treacherous human cultivator. Their gazes intertwined in the void, bursting with invisible sparks. Apang Yi pointed the troll-bone spear in his hand at Qin Zhan and said in a deep voice, "Qin Zhan, we meet again. Today your luck won't be as good as that day. I will flatten the entire demon-subduing city and hang your head under the black cloud. I will let you watch the entire 13 Specter fall into the control of the Rakshasa state." Qin Zhan had already put away his solemn expression and smiled indifferently. "Apang Yi, your mouth is still as powerful as before. Your ability to talk big is getting better and better. Last time you ran fast. This time I've prepared a big gift for you. I just don't know if you can accept it. Be careful behind you." Qin Zhan didn't care about Apang Ye's threat at all. His words were relaxed and his expression was calm. Not only did his words melt away Apang Ye's momentum, but he also released a smoke bomb. Apang Ye's pupils suddenly shrank. He had some concerns in his heart and even separated a strand of death intent to check behind him. As soon as Qin Zhan's words came out, Apang Yi felt that there was someone behind him. "Don't try to scare me. My Rakshasa state has used a secret technique to seal off 13 Specter. Within 5 days, no one will be able to contact this place. Who else on 13 Specter can pose a threat to this Grand Wizard?" Apang Yi said sternly. "Ha ha ha, since there isn't anyone, let's fight. Why are you still asking?" Qin Zhan looked up and laughed. The soldiers inside the protective shield also laughed out loud. Apang Ye's face turned green and white. His anger rose uncontrollably. With his death intent, he instantly controlled all the ghost soldiers below Wu Gui. Nearly 100,000 ghost soldiers were all under Apang Ye's control. Dark art, ghost mother art. Only Wu Gui and above could use this high-level dark art. Once controlled, the ghost army would completely become a unified system. Under the control of a single brain, they would attack efficiently and unpredictably. The Balrog crocodiles on the ground quickly scattered. The effect of the spirit light cannon's attack immediately weakened, and it became much more difficult to accurately hit the target. The remaining rotten dragon flying cavalry also split into several waves and attacked the northwest stronghold from different directions. Rotting liquid continuously spewed out from the air and landed on the protective shield, continuously consuming the protective shield created by the spiritual array. The Balrog crocodiles began to indiscriminately spit out dark fire, igniting everything in their path and interfering with the spirit light cannon's vision. The nether ghost body flew everywhere without any pattern, disrupting the formation of the steel puppet. In a large-scale war, it was impossible to win with brute strength alone unless you had an overwhelming advantage. Obviously, neither the ghost army nor the human cultivators had such strength. Although on the surface, Apang Ye's ghost army had the absolute upper hand, they did not have a grand wizard who could withstand the sniping of the spirit sniper and the sneak attack of a level 18 talisman. Therefore, they did not dare to recklessly fight. They could only rely on the ghost army to wear them down. Qin Zhan saw the changes in the entire battlefield and narrowed his eyes. This time, Apang Yi came prepared and had clearly studied some tactic. For these dark ghosts who had evolved into wizards but were still occupied by all kinds of desires, it was not easy for them to come up with such a strategy. Qin Zhan could not help but applaud Apang Yi. Of course, he was not unprepared. He still had a few cards to play. Qin Zhan's lips curled up slightly and issued an order. Hundreds of combat shuttles suddenly rose from behind the rotten dragon flying cavalry. A Yuanying-class steel puppet drilled out from under a Balrog crocodile and grabbed its tail, tearing it to pieces. The vortexes in Pang Ye's eyes spun violently. Behind him, more than 100 witch ghosts scattered and rushed down. The hundreds of combat shuttles had just scattered the rotten dragon flying cavalry and successfully killed hundreds of them. However, they did not have time to carry out the next order. Several black lights flew over and instantly destroyed dozens of combat shuttles. The power of the witch ghosts was naturally not something the rotten dragon flying cavalry could compare to. Qin Zhan's pupils shrank and issued another order. Swoosh, swoosh, dozens of lights shot into the void from different directions on the ground. Pa pa pa. Dozens of witch ghosts were instantly killed. Damn it! Pang Yi roared and waved his hand. All witch army, attack! Behind them, over 800 Wu ghosts swarmed out towards the northwest stronghold. This force was so terrifying that it was enough to destroy several armies of human cultivators. Spiritual sniper? This daddy wants to see how much ammunition you have. Pang Yi said fiercely. The reason why the witch army did not move until the last moment was to reduce their consumption. It was not realistic to use the witch army to break through the human cultivators' defensive line. A round of spiritual light cannons could kill more than 100 witch ghosts. In that case, the losses would be too great. Now that the witch ghost army was mobilized, the spiritual light cannons were almost depleted. Even if they could still fire, it would be limited. The human cultivators relied on their resources to resist the ghost army. Once their resources were depleted, their resistance would be greatly reduced. By forcing the human cultivators to fight, the ghost army would win by half. Once the witch ghost army joined the battle, the situation immediately changed. The steel puppets were quickly suppressed by the witch ghosts and could no longer display their unparalleled power. The steel puppets were dismantled into scrap metal by the witch ghost. More than 10 minutes later, there were only 200 to 300 steel puppets left. Qin Zhan recalled them back to the stronghold, leaving only 10 Yuanying-class steel puppets outside to continue fighting guerrilla warfare. Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin were no longer by Qin Zhan's side. When the spiritual light cannons were fired, they had already left the stronghold and hid somewhere in the city. The two divine generals had never forgotten about the plan to assassinate the Grand Wizard. This was one of their main missions in the 13th Specter. Qin Zhan used his trump cards one by one. Each of them could cause significant damage to the ghost army, but they could not stop the ghost army's attack. When almost all of his trump cards were used, the ghost army was almost completely wiped out. Hundreds of thousands of ghost army disappeared in the void. The number of Balrog crocodile tank cavalry on the ground decreased drastically. There were less than 1,000 of them when they attacked. The decaying dragon cavalry was even worse off. After a few waves of attacks, there were less than 500 of them left. Only a few dozen soul capture ghost kings were still standing. The others had completely dissipated in the void under the attacks of the cannons and talismans. The battle was in full swing. Smoke filled the air. It seemed to have reached its climax and should be coming to an end. However, the battle had only just begun. The ghost army's charge and the human cultivators' attacks were just the prelude to every large-scale battle. The cultivator army had not moved out yet. After a round of attacks, if the ghost army was still there, bayonets would be unavoidable. Usually, the cultivator army would be at a disadvantage in hand-to-hand combat. After all, there was still a gap in strength between them and the dark ghost. Qin Zhan glanced at the Zhan Lu sword in his hand. Qianhe, it's about to start again. Can you see it? Li Hu, who had been standing to the side, saw that Qin Zhan seemed to be distracted and asked worriedly, Qin Zhan, the Balrog crocodile and decaying dragon cavalry have begun to destroy the protective shield. Should we attack? Qin Zhan did not answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at a certain area in the east and shook his head. Wait a little longer. Let the long-range cultivators continue to consume as much energy as possible. Inform the spirit snipers to not reserve any ammunition and try their best to kill the witch ghost. I still have 100 spirit magnetic bullets in my room. They are all mighty spirit bullet. Distribute them to the spirit snipers in the settlement. By the way, don't fire the last round of spirit light cannons just in case. Li Hu bowed. Understood, Qin Zhan. With that, Li Hu turned around to carry out his mission. Looking at Li Hu's broad back, Qin Zhan sighed inwardly. Usually, Yu Yan would be the one to carry out all this. Without this coquettish woman, he suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. Qin Zhan smiled bitterly. He almost turned around to give another order to the air beside him. However, there was no sign of Yu Yan beside him. Qin Zhan could only call out to Li Hu. Li Hu, wait a moment. Li Hu turned around with a suspicious look on his face. Qin Zhan's hand shook, and a talisman shot into Li Hu's hand. When he looked down, Li Hu sucked in a breath of cold air. A level 18 blizzard ice talisman. This level of ice talisman was enough to ignite a violent blizzard and freeze everything within a few kilometers into ice sculptures. It would maintain an extremely low temperature for more than 20 minutes and kill everything. Use it when you need it. See for yourself, Qin Zhan instructed. Yes. Li Hu's hand that was holding the talisman was trembling. He had never used such a high-level talisman before. Li Hu conveyed Qin Zhan's instructions truthfully. He also took out 100 mighty-grade spirit magnetic bullets and distributed them to the spirit snipers in the stronghold. The consumption of witch ghosts continued. The witch ghosts continued to be shot in the head. The witch ghost army no longer dared to hover in the air. Instead, they scattered around the stronghold. However, even so, they were still unable to avoid the snipers' attack. Soon, the witch ghost army's numbers were reduced from 900 to 500. Less than 20 spirit snipers were able to cause such heavy damage to the powerful witch ghost army. Chapter 477. Time passed bit by bit. The stronghold's protective shield started to become translucent. The protective shield was weakening. The Balrog crocodile and the rotting dragon kept attacking the shield. Every time they attacked, the shield would emit a round of light and weaken a little bit. The cultivators standing in front of the stronghold building all looked anxious. It had been almost an hour, but Qin Zhan still hadn't given the order to attack. Once the protective shield was broken, the entire stronghold would be exposed to the ghost army. It would be too late to attack. The emperor was not worried, but the eunuchs were. Li Hu was like an ant on a hot pan. He didn't know what Qin Zhan was thinking. This godlike general stood there motionlessly with his eyes slightly closed, as if he was meditating. Qin Zhan looked calm on the surface, but his heart was in turmoil. He was waiting for two signals. One was the signal that Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin were about to launch a sneak attack. The other was the signal that the victorious troops had finished healing. But there was no response from the two signals. The victorious conqueror could understand. After all, healing wasn't something he could control. But Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin were silent after hiding. It was as if they had disappeared. Although the consumption of long-range attacks was a heavy blow to the ghost army, the consumption of resources was irreversible. The more they used, the less they had. The snipers' shooting frequency was dropping rapidly. First of all, every shot consumed their spiritual thoughts. Second of all, there were not many spiritual magnetic bullets left. Another hour passed. The energy of the protective shield had been exhausted. It could be broken at any time. The situation became very critical. At this time, a Pang Yi, who was in the void, suddenly opened his slightly closed eyes. He waved his hand, and the hundreds of three-headed dead spirit pythons that were wriggling around him were finally released. This group of terrifying giant ghost beasts, like wild beasts that had broken free from their cages, swooped down and crashed into the protective shield. If the shield was hit by the three-headed dead spirit pythons, it would collapse completely in a few hits. Qin Zhan couldn't wait any longer. Just as he was about to give the order to attack, a majestic spiritual aura rose from the stronghold building. The victorious troops finally finished healing. With a light cry, a yellow light shot out from the building. Dong! The victorious Always army was like a cannonball as they landed at Qin Zhan's side. The penetrating rainbow spear in their hands buzzed. This spear that had been with the victorious Always army for nearly 50 years could no longer hold back its impulse to attack. Qin Zhan glanced at the victorious troops and smiled. Then, his eyes became sharp and he roared, "All troops attack! Kill!" An order was given. The anxious soldiers swarmed out like a swarm of bees. More than 2,000 cultivators from the stronghold and more than 5,000 cultivators from the victorious army marched out at the same time. What the protective shield blocked was the aura of death. All the Hades and dead spirits would be blocked outside, but the aura of spiritual energy would not be blocked. Defensive barriers were like air to cultivators. When they charged out, the first ones to be killed were the Balrog crocodiles and rot dragons that were constantly attacking the defensive barrier. Multicolored light shot out in all directions. The flying swords were like lightning. The cultivators had been gathering their strength for a long time, and their momentum was like a rainbow. In an instant, they killed most of the remaining Balrog crocodiles and rot dragons. These pitiful ghost beasts that were focused on attacking the defensive barrier were already exhausted. They did not put up much resistance before they were killed. However, the witch ghosts that were hiding in the dark to avoid the spirit snipers no longer hid when they saw the cultivators swarming out. They shot out from the ruins of the city into the void. Once the cultivators joined the battle, the spirit snipers would not be able to display their skills. In a chaotic battle, there was no way to display their skills. The difficulty of each shot would greatly increase, otherwise they would accidentally injure their companions. The 200,000 ghost army, after several waves of consumption, was almost completely wiped out. At most, there were only 500 witch ghosts, hundreds of Balrog crocodiles, and dozens of rot dragons left. Almost all of the nether ghosts in their ghost state had been killed. Only the dozens of soul capturer ghost kings remained. The number seemed to have been greatly reduced, but the true strength of the ghost army was still there. The 200,000 soldiers in front were actually cannon fodder. The truly terrifying ones were the hundreds of three-headed dead spirit pythons. Even on the front line, ghost beasts of this level did not appear often. After the 8,000 cultivators killed all of the Balrog crocodiles and rot dragons, they arranged themselves into a formation. Each group of 50 people faced a three-headed dead spirit python. The 100 giant beasts stalled the 5,000 cultivators, while the remaining 3,000 soldiers charged towards the witch ghosts and soul capturer ghost kings. The tragic battle thus began. The human cultivators had the upper hand in terms of numbers. However, in just one exchange, dozens of people died. The three-headed dead spirit python was too strong. The attacks of the Foundation establishment cultivators were completely useless against it. Only the attacks of the Jin Dan cultivators could hurt it. Among the 8,000 cultivators, there were only 800 to 900 Jin Dan cultivators. Apangyi laughed coldly and said to the 5 Grand Wizard beside him, "Everyone, it's time for you to show off your skills. Let's end this quickly. Wu Ho is coming with the main army. If we can't take over this place before Wu Ho arrives, we'll be embarrassed." The 5 Grand Wizards smiled sinisterly and jumped down from the black screen. They charged towards the cultivators with a violent death aura. "Not good, the Grand Wizard has made his move." Someone in the cultivators shouted. The name of the Grand Wizard shook the Federation. Anyone who heard it would tremble in fear. The cultivators were no exception. With this shout, all the cultivators were stunned. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of cultivators were killed. Just as everyone's eyes were on the 5 Grand Wizard, 2 rays of light shot out from the ruins below at lightning speed. Pust pust, the light flashed. 2 of the Grand Wizard's bodies were pierced through. The 2 Grand Wizards looked down at their chests in disbelief. There was a round hole there, pierced from the front to the back. Even the Grand Wizard core in their bodies was shattered by the impact. Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin appeared in the sky. They were the ones who launched the sneak attack and killed the 2 Grand Wizard instantly. The remaining 3 Grand Wizard were shocked. They didn't expect the cultivators to ambush them. The 2 cultivators who suddenly appeared in front of them were Yuanying Peak Grand Cultivators. They were much more powerful than ordinary Yuanying Peak Grand Cultivators. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to pierce through the bodies of the 2 Grand Wizard instantly. Apangyi watched the 2 senior magi being killed right in front of his own eyes, and almost broke his teeth. The Grand Wizard was the most precious fighting force. How could Apangyi not be angry when he lost 2 in the blink of an eye? Kill! Apangyi's voice was like muffled thunder, exploding in the sky. Hundreds of 3-headed dead spirit pythons suddenly turned into demons. The 3 mouths spewed out terrifying underworld flames, burning everything in front of them to ashes. Hundreds of cultivators fell. The Foundation establishment cultivators were too weak in front of the 3-headed dead spirit pythons. The victorious army held penetrating rainbow in their hands and aimed at a Grand Wizard, shooting straight at him. The Grand Wizard was still in shock when his companions were killed. He didn't recover from the shock and was stabbed in the shoulder by the victorious army's spear. The Grand Wizard's body wasn't as hard as steel, so he didn't feel much after receiving this blow. The Grand Wizard growled and raised the Devil's Blade in his hand. The victorious army had no choice but to withdraw their spear. The other 2 Grand Wizards, after a brief moment of absent-mindedness, roared and attacked Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin respectively. A few minutes later, less than half of the 8,000 cultivators were left. Qin Zhan wielded Zhan Lu and fought with all his might to kill every Wu ghost that approached him. However, his strength was limited. Qin Zhan was barely able to protect the soldiers in front of him, but he couldn't take care of those who were too far away. Another 5 minutes later, the cultivators were left with less than 2,000 people. The rest of the soldiers had all fallen. In the sky, only Chu Tianqi, Kong Lanxin, and the victorious army were left fighting with the 3 Grand Wizard. Chu Tianqi was completely suppressing the Grand Wizard. The other side almost didn't have the strength to fight back, and was suppressed by Chu Tianqi. Kong Lanxin's side was the same. The lowly's body had an extremely terrifying strength. The huge sword in her hand was wider than her body and weighed more than 10,000 pounds. But in her hand, it was as if it was weightless. The Grand Wizard who was fighting with Kong Lanxin at the beginning thought that he had picked up an advantage and was fighting against the weakest of the 3 cultivators. But when they really started fighting, the Grand Wizard realized that he was wrong. This little girl, who seemed to be underage, had the terrifying explosive power of a Tyrannosaurus. The witch hammer in the Grand Wizard's hand was like a toy compared to the huge sword in Kong Lanxin's hand. Kong Lanxin's sword made the Grand Wizard's arm numb. Sword after sword, the Grand Wizard felt that his internal organs were about to be shattered. The only battle that was evenly matched was between the victorious army and the last Grand Wizard. The focus of the battle between these 2 was speed. They were everywhere in the sky. Every thrust of the victorious army's spear carried a terrifying aura. If the Grand Wizard was hit, his body would be directly penetrated. The Grand Wizard didn't dare to be careless. He used all kinds of dark spells to move around the victorious army. Others couldn't interfere in the battle between Grand Wizards. They couldn't even get close. Even the fierce-looking 3-headed dead spirit python didn't dare to get too close to the battle between the 3 experts. The battle finally started to tilt in the ghost army's favor. But Pang Yi wasn't happy at all. He had brought 200,000 ghost army with him. Now, just by looking at the numbers, it could be said that his army was completely wiped out. More than half of the witchcraft ghost army was dead. Almost none of the ground cavalry was left. The rotting dragon flying cavalry was also dead. Only the soul assimilating ghost king was left. The grand wizard also lost too. The remaining 3 grand wizards didn't seem to be a match for the human cultivator. Even if Pang Yi won this battle, he couldn't be happy. The losses were too great. If this happened every time, the Rakshasa state wouldn't be able to invade the Federation. They wouldn't even be able to reach the 4th ring starfield. Pang Yi's cold eyes locked onto Chu Tianqi. He had seen this human cultivator before. He had all the information about this person on the Rakshasa state's blacklist. He was a member of the Federation's divine generals. As long as he could kill this person, this battle wouldn't be a loss. Pang Yi even gave up on capturing Qin Zhan. He focused all his attention on Chu Tianqi. He wanted to kill him in one strike. Divine generals weren't easy to kill. Even if Pang Yi was a high-level grand wizard and had the strength of an early-stage soul formation cultivator, he wasn't 100% sure that he could kill the divine generals in one strike. He didn't know if these divine generals had any life-saving magic treasures or other unknown protective items. Pang Yi stood alone in the darkness, waiting for an opportunity. Chapter 478. The battle between the great cultivators and the Grand Wizard was not only happening in the Northwest stronghold. It was the same in the other 3 strongholds. However, compared to the Northwest stronghold, the battles in the other 3 strongholds were much less intense. There were only 1 or 2 great cultivators fighting the Grand Wizard. Unlike the Northwest stronghold, there were 3 pairs of great cultivators fighting the Grand Wizard in the sky. Of course, the other ghost armies were not idle either. They never stopped attacking the protective barrier. The remaining soldiers fought desperately against the hundreds of 3-headed death spirit pythons. They could not care less about the others. Dozens of soul-assimilating ghost kings launched their final attack on the protective barrier. Qin Zhan was already at his limit, blocking 3 soul-assimilating ghost kings by himself. The Zhanlu sword was unleashed to its fullest potential. Whoosh! A shadow pierced through Qin Zhan's body. The death aura invaded Qin Zhan's body. His body stiffened. A soul-assimilating ghost clawed at Qin Zhan's chest and tore off a large piece of flesh. Qin Zhan's wife, Qian He's delicate figure appeared in front of him. "Don't go." Qin Zhan suddenly came to his senses. He pierced the soul-assimilating ghost king's head with his sword, and the sword's spirit instantly destroyed it. Bam! Qin Zhan's back was hit hard. He spat out a mouthful of blood. With a backhand slash, another soul-assimilating ghost king was killed. Bam! Qin Zhan's head was hit hard. His body fell to the ground like a cannonball, and all his teeth fell out. His body felt like it was about to explode. His vision was blurry, and his consciousness was drifting. "Can't I do it?" Qin Zhan asked weakly. He wanted to stand up, but he could not do it. 2 staff members rushed out of the building and helped Qin Zhan up. He roared, "Go back and continue with your work. Don't worry about me." The 2 staff members looked at Qin Zhan's ferocious face. They were so scared that they retreated and ran back into the building. Even if the protective barrier was broken, the stronghold building's defense could still hold on for a while. At this moment, Qin Zhan just wanted to drag things out a little longer, just a little longer. Qin Zhan stood shakily. He wanted to step into the air and fly, but the spiritual qi in his body was chaotic and out of his control. "Damn it," Qin Zhan cursed. Almost at the same time, in the void, Chu Tianqi finally found an opening in the battle against the Grand Wizard and threw the spear in his hand with all his might. It pierced through the Grand Wizard's body, and killed him in one hit. Chu Tianqi's weapon was also a spear. Unlike the victorious army, the spear he used was lighter, with a total weight of less than 1,000 caddies. The ever-victorious army's penetrating rainbow spear was as heavy as a boulder. It weighed 30,000 jeans, and a single spear strike was enough to crush most obstacles. The cultivators below, who were still fighting desperately, saw Chu Tianqi kill another Grand Wizard, and their depressed expressions were all lifted. Just as Chu Tianqi retracted his spear and heaved a sigh of relief, he suddenly felt his back tighten. "Be careful. Not too far away," Kong Lanqin warned. But it was already too late. Pang Yi had instantly launched a sneak attack. The giant demon bone spear in his hand pierced through Chu Tianqi's back and out of his chest. Blood flowed out of Chu Tianqi's mouth. He looked down at the white bone spear that had pierced through his chest. "Fuck you, sneak attacking me," Chu Tianqi cursed, but his aura was extremely weak. The giant demon bone spear carried with it death energy, causing Chu Tianqi's spiritual qi to become chaotic. To an ordinary person, a chest-piercing wound was almost fatal. But to a great cultivator, this was not the case. What truly injured Chu Tianqi was the giant demon bone spear's death energy. Pang Yi was a high-level Grand Wizard with a giant demon bloodline. This spear was a leg bone taken from Pang Ye's ancestor. Chu Tianqi's mind stirred. The silver spear in his hand shot out, piercing towards Pang Yi with an astonishing penetrating force. Despite being heavily injured, Pang Yi was still able to fight back. Pang Ye's expression was horrified, but his dying struggles could not threaten him. Pang Yi exerted force in his hand, trying to use the bone spear that had pierced through Chu Tianqi to block the incoming silver spear. But Pang Yi suddenly felt that something was wrong. A gust of cold air rushed towards him at an extremely fast speed. His intuition told him that it was very dangerous. He had no choice but to let go of the bone spear in his hand to dodge. Whoosh! A talisman brushed past Pang Ye's face and shot past. A trace of cold air instantly froze Pang Ye's face. But this amount of cold air was not enough to hurt a high-level Grand Wizard. The giant demon bone spear's death energy rushed to his face, and the cold air was instantly expelled. Li Hu floated in the air far away. That talisman was the level 18 Blizzard Ice talisman that Qin Zhan had given him. Li Hu's expression was vexed. He had missed. But that level 18 Blizzard Ice talisman was not wasted. After Pang Yi dodged, the ice talisman's speed increased. It shot straight towards the group of Soul Catcher Ghost Kings that were continuously attacking the protective shield. One of the Soul Catcher Ghost Kings was hit head-on. With a boom, the surrounding temperature plummeted. The air seemed to have frozen. Strong winds blew within a 5-kilometer radius. Snow and ice intersected, and tornadoes and hailstorms swept everything in the area. The terror of a level 18 talisman was fully displayed at this moment. Dozens of Soul Catcher Ghost Kings were swallowed by the extreme cold and the blizzard before they could even react. The frozen ice sculptures were shattered into pieces. A few 3-headed dead spirit pythons were also affected. They fell from the air and smashed into pieces on the ground. Although the protective shield was on the verge of collapse and could shatter at any time, it was still able to block out the blizzard and save the stronghold building. In the air, Chu Tianqi pulled out the bone spear from his chest. He could no longer support himself and plummeted to the ground. Victorious troops and Kong Lanqin saw this and tried to save Chu Tianqi. But they were stopped by the two Grand Wizard. Li Hu swooped down with all his strength and intercepted Chu Tianqi in midair. Pang Yi slapped Li Hu's back. Li Hu was only at the early stage of Jindan. How could he withstand a high-level Grand Wizard's attack? Even a casual attack was not enough. Li Hu and Chu Tianqi fell from the air into the protective shield together and landed heavily on the ground. Kong Lanqin was anxious. Her small body exploded with violent spirit qi. The color of her hair turned from black to light gold. Spirit Explosion Frenzy. Kong Lanxin did not intend to go frenzy. The side effect of this move was too great. After using it, she would be in a state of exhaustion and would not have any strength left. But now she could not care less. She just had to kill this grand wizard in front of her. After going frenzy, Kong Lanxin's combat power increased exponentially. The grand wizard, who was already at a disadvantage, was no match for her. He was beaten up like a meatball by Kong Lanxin. Pang Yi saw that his subordinates were losing. He stretched out his hand and the bone spear that had just fallen to the ground flew into his hand. He joined the battle. Kong Lanxin could have finished her opponent in 10 moves, but Pang Yi's participation put her at a disadvantage. After fighting for a few minutes, Kong Lanxin consumed a lot of her spirit qi. Her frenzy was disappearing. Finally, she could not hold on any longer. Pang Yi hit her abdomen. She spat out a mouthful of blood. The frenzy in her body was also dispersed. Just like her spirit qi, Kong Lanxin also fell to the ground. Damn it! Kong Lanxin said unwillingly. Her body smashed into the ground like a meteor. A deep pit formed beside the stronghold building. Kong Lanxin's petite body lay flat in the middle of the pit. Her face was expressionless. It seemed that this mission could not be completed. The 2 divine generals were shot down one after another. Everyone in the stronghold building was in the lowest mood. Despair was written on everyone's face. Only the victorious troops were left fighting alone in the void. 1 against 3. There was no chance of winning. However, this bad-tempered general did not back down. He fought fearlessly while cursing. Motherf asterisk curse. Do you think I'm scared just because there are 3 of you? Come on, I'll kill you with my spear. I still have level 18 talismans that I haven't used yet. If you piss me off, I'll take them out and use them on you. I'll let you bastards have a taste of fire on your buttocks. Ha ha, this is great. The victorious troops' curses echoed in the air. In reality, the victorious troops was being kicked around like a rubber ball by the 3 grand wizard. The wounds on his body kept increasing. Blood dripped from the victorious troops' body and dripped to the ground. General Chang, you should run first, Qin Zhan said telepathically. Run? Motherf asterisk cur, I won't run even if I'm cut into pieces. Qin Zhan, you son of AB asterisk TC. Why did you come up with such a stupid idea? Do you think I can't beat them? You're F asterisk king underestimating me. I'll show you how I'm going to chop them up one by one. The victorious troops cursed. Although the victorious troops appeared to be relaxed and kept cursing as if he was at ease, everyone watching was moved to tears. Bang bang crack dong. The victorious troops' face, chest, back and abdomen were constantly being hit. He blocked one attack, but the other 2 could easily hit him. Being hit by the Grand Wizard like this, how many nails could a person's bones be hammered? However, the victorious troops stood on top of the protective shield and refused to budge. The victorious troops was already injured. After treatment, he had only recovered 70%. He could not wait to get out of the spirit liquid tank. Now that he was being attacked by the Grand Wizard, his body could not withstand it anymore. He was only relying on his iron will. The victorious troops could not move. If he moved, the 3 Grand Wizard could easily shatter the protective shield below him. He was the last line of defense. If he fell, everything would be over. Many people in the stronghold building began to cry. They could not bear to look at the victorious troops' unyielding appearance. Qin Zhan turned his face and glared at Chu Tianqi. Why did the F asterisk king reinforcements have to wait 10 days? Every second of delay is a life. Chu Tianqi clutched his chest and was extremely weak. He was also helpless in the face of Qin Zhan's scolding. He was not the president of the Federation. Moreover, the Rakshasa state's sudden attack on the Federation was very sudden. There was no warning at all. Furthermore, they were coming in a menacing manner. They were determined to devour the Federation in one gulp. At this time, everything that happened to the demon-subduing city was happening at every border of the Federation. Some areas might be even more difficult than the 13 Specter. Victorious troops, if you move out of the way, I won't kill you. How about it? A contemptuous smile appeared on Pang Ye's handsome greenish-gray face. He did not believe that there would be anyone who was not afraid of death. The victorious troops' bravery was unexpectedly tenacious, which made Pang Ye very unhappy. General Chang, please move out of the way. Where there is life, there is hope. An injured cultivator in the distance covered his left arm and shouted. Your subordinate is right. Where there is life, there is hope. Don't you humans have many classic stories, such as the humiliation of kneeling? You can take it as a humiliation now. In the future, you can find me for revenge. The smile on Pang Ye's face became even wider. The victorious troop's blood-stained face revealed a serious expression as he touched his chin with one hand. Okay. The victorious troops suddenly said. Ha ha ha, a wise man submits to circumstances. General Chang is indeed a wise man. Pang Ye looked up and laughed, his ridicule overflowing. At this moment, it was even more satisfying than devouring Yuanying's human soul. Humans, humph, aren't they a race that is afraid of death? Move out of the way. The other Grand Wizard saw that the victorious troops had no intention of moving and said. Chapter 479. You're courting death. The Grand Wizard roared. Pang Ye's laughter stopped abruptly, knowing that he had been tricked. The bone spear in his hand pierced towards the victorious soldier's heart. Poochie. The spear pierced through. The victorious soldier instantly moved a few inches, avoiding a fatal blow, but his shoulder was pierced. Bah! The victorious soldier spat out a mouthful of blood on Pang Ye's face. Bang bang bang, Pang Ye was furious. His fists rained down on the victorious soldier's body. Are you trying to scratch my itch like a girl? The victorious soldier sneered. General Chang, don't move aside. Someone kept shouting. The victorious soldier acted as if he didn't hear anything, allowing Pang Ye to continue punching him. He didn't dodge or resist. Whoosh! Suddenly, a silver light flashed past. Pang Ye was shocked. This silver light made him feel a trace of fear. The victorious soldier suddenly had a 5-inch-long dagger in his hand. The sharp dagger shone with a cold light, emitting a powerful spirit energy. Pang Ye almost fell for it. A black vortex appeared in his palm, and he slapped the victorious soldier's chest. Bang! The victorious soldier fell to the ground like a kite with a broken string. With a boom, a huge hole appeared on the ground. The victorious soldier's body was falling apart, but he still stood up with a mocking smile. Pang Ye, you're king coward. It's so troublesome to fight me with 3 people. If you have the ability, let me rest for 3 days and then fight me one-on-one. Pang Ye's anger had reached its peak. Being played by a human cultivator again and again, it was unforgivable. Pang Ye ordered, and all the 3-headed dead spirit pythons in the air rushed towards the protective shield. Poochie. With one hit, the protective shield was completely shattered. The stronghold building was completely exposed. Thoughtless, Qin Zhan looked at the 3-headed dead spirit pythons that were over 100 meters long in the air and smiled sadly. This time it was really over. The stronghold was lost, 2 divine generals were buried with it, and the fierce tiger army of the Northwest Military Region was almost completely annihilated, and so many resources were used. Sigh. Qin Zhan sighed and sat on the ground. He no longer had any way to resist the ghost army. Chu Tianchi clutched his chest as he sat on a piece of rock. He watched as a Balrog crocodile that was lucky enough to survive charged towards him. He was unwilling to accept the fact that this was his final outcome. Chu Tianchi was too lazy to deal with the incoming Balrog crocodile. However, a beam of light shot out from the building and killed the Balrog crocodile. The spirit snipers were still protecting the great cultivators. This was the only thing they could do right now. It didn't seem to be of any use since everyone would die eventually. However, the obsession in their hearts made them unable to bear watching the two divine generals fall in front of them. They wanted to escape for as long as they could. Kong Lanxin didn't have any strength after going berserk. After falling to the ground, she lay motionless in the pit, looking up at the dusky sky. Damn it, if I had mastered the spirit explosion sword art, I wouldn't be like this today. Kong Lanxin's face was full of regret. Victorious Army was the one with the most serious injuries among the four, but he was also the only one standing. He was covered in blood and looked like an Azura god of death. As a soldier, even if he died, he had to stand. The sneer on Victorious Army's face never stopped. He was defeated today, but he didn't lose face. He didn't let down the Federation, didn't let down his family, and even more so, didn't let down the people of the Federation. Everyone in the stronghold building stopped what they were doing. It was useless to do anything now. The final round of spirit light cannons wouldn't change the result. The northwest stronghold had fallen, and the great demon subduing formation was finished. Qin Zhan, you said that Li Daochong isn't a shaman cultivator. Do you still think so? He hasn't appeared yet, and he even took a group of cultivators with him to disrupt the morale of the army. He might be pretending to be a cultivator to hunt down the guerrilla cultivators in the demon-subduing city, Chu Tianqi said as he coughed up blood. In the past 3 days, Chu Tianqi revealed the purpose of coming to 13 Specter to Qin Zhan. Chu Tianqi trusted this famous general very much. Qin Zhan knew that Chu Tianqi suspected that Li Daochong was a shaman cultivator, so he tried his best to argue that he didn't believe it at all. The two of them had a dispute because of this. Qin Zhan told Chu Tianqi that Li Daochong would definitely come to resist the ghost army 3 days later. Chu Tianqi sneered at Qin Zhan for being childish, and bet that Li Daochong would never come. It would be good enough if he didn't add insult to injury. At this moment, the ghost army broke through the protective shield and killed nearly 10,000 cultivators. The northwest city was almost destroyed. The 3 great cultivators suffered heavy injuries, and Qin Zhan was on the verge of death. There wasn't even a shadow of Li Daochong. For the first time, Qin Zhan's heart wavered. The stronghold building was on the verge of collapse after being hit by the 3-headed dead spirit python. This building, built with star spirit crystal, had a very solid foundation and hardness. It could withstand 3 grand wizard level attack. However, what was the use of this? No matter how strong the fortress was, it was useless without anyone guarding it. It was only a matter of time before it was broken. Qin Zhan, didn't you King tell me that Li Daochong was in your northwest stronghold? Where is he now? Where the hell did he go? Didn't you say that he could instantly kill a grand wizard? Why isn't he here? Victorious Army suddenly roared. He was unwilling, not at all. The demon-subduing city was gone just like that, and it was gone in his hands. Qin Zhan was speechless. He sighed in his heart and did not say a word. Qin Zhan, don't you think it strange? The ghost army attacking the northwest stronghold is the strongest, and the ghost army of the other 3 gates is obviously much weaker. The division masters of the other 3 gates have all sent a statistical report, and the ghost army that we encountered in the northwest stronghold is much stronger than the other 3 gates. The number is also twice as much. If we go to guard any of the other 3 gates, the ghost army will be completely annihilated by us. Li Hu suddenly said while lying on the ground. Li Hu was injured in order to save Chu Tianqi. At this moment, he was unable to move. He looked at the sky with a pair of lifeless eyes. The defeat was set and there was no way to reverse it. However, Li Hu was unwilling to die without knowing why. Someone tipped off the Rakshasa state? They knew that there were 2 divine generals in the northwest stronghold, so the ghost army that was arranged to attack the north gate and the northwest stronghold was the strongest. Kong Lanxin's face suddenly showed shock. When these words came out, Chu Tianqi and Qin Zhan both sucked in a breath of cold air. Li Daochong, the two of them said in unison. Victorious army was dumbfounded. What Li Daochong? What does it have to do with him? Chu Tianqi said regretfully. Qin Zhan, tell us. Qin Zhan's face was full of guilt, and he revealed the true purpose of the two divine generals' 13 Specter. Witchcraft cultivator? Victorious army's eyes widened. That's right. Now it seems that Li Daochong is a witchcraft cultivator. It's all my fault for being too careless. Qin Zhan nodded. Forget it, forget it. Who cares if he's a 5th cultivator or 6th cultivator? At least we know why we died. Since we were tricked by the Rakshasa state, we can only blame ourselves for being stupid. To be able to die with Qin Zhan, I won't be too lonely. Ah! Victorious army was quite open-minded. I can't accept this. Li Daochong, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Li Hu said fiercely. You can't become a ghost for the time being. However, if you become a ghost, you'd better not come looking for me. Otherwise, you'll feel even more despair than now. Just as Li Hu finished speaking, a faint voice came from the side. The 5 of them looked in the direction of the voice. On the dusky street that was filled with dust, a figure slowly walked over, breaking through the dust. Li Daochong, who they had been talking about, suddenly appeared in front of them. Li Daochong had consumed too much energy in the last round of making talismans and almost couldn't hold on. It took him a lot of time to recover his strength, so he could have come earlier. Yu Yan had wanted to rush over first with the reinforcements, but who knew that they would encounter the ghost fog on the short journey of more than 20 kilometers? They couldn't come out even after a long time. It was Li Daochong who brought them out. Otherwise, Yu Yan and the cultivator army wouldn't have been able to come out even if they had to walk around for another day. Li Daochong, you son of a bitch. I'll kill you. You don't want to be a human but you want to be a ghost. Has your conscience been eaten by a dog? Li Hu cursed when he saw Li Daochong. Since he was going to die anyway, he had nothing to be afraid of. Li Hu, if you bark again, believe it or not, I'll pull out your tongue. Yu Yan's soft voice came from the other side. Qin Zhan's expression changed and became a little strange. If Li Daochong was a witch cultivator, why didn't he kill Yu Yan? Li Daochong walked to the middle of the 5 people and glanced at them expressionlessly. He had heard every word of their conversation. Which cultivator? Me? Li Daochong shook his head helplessly and had no intention of explaining. He then looked up at the nearly 100 three-headed dead spirit pythons in the air. Li Daochong's calm expression revealed a hint of greed. These giant ghost beasts were equivalent to high-level witch ghosts. The soul power converted from killing one was quite considerable. To put it bluntly, the experience points were quite high. Whoosh! Li Daochong jumped up and shot into the air. Song ink appeared in his hand. The first stage of the 9 cracks saber technique, crushing rocks and splitting earth. The green saber light scattered in all directions, and several rays of light shot into the sky. Nearly 100 three-headed dead spirit pythons were all chopped into pieces. Black blood rained down from the sky. Patter, patter, dong, boom, countless huge pieces of meat fell from the sky. Gulu gulu. A three-headed dead spirit python's head rolled in front of Qin Zhan. The dead spirit python's one dead eye was open. It couldn't be more dead. It was extremely difficult to deal with a three-headed dead spirit python. Only Yuanian cultivators could fight it alone. If they encountered a three-headed dead spirit python without any powerful treasures or equipment, they should quickly run. Almost 100 three-headed dead spirit pythons had been killed in an instant. This was a huge blow to the people in the stronghold. Many of them rubbed their eyes, wondering if they had already died and were hallucinating. Of course, they weren't hallucinating. What they saw was real. The blood rain scattered by the three-headed dead spirit pythons scattered the dust around. The people in the northwest stronghold building, who were facing a desperate situation, could only see a black mass of cultivators not far away. When the dust had completely dispersed, Qin Zhan looked at the huge group of cultivators in front of him in shock. He was stunned for a moment, not knowing where these cultivators came from. Chu Tianqi was the same. He was a little confused. Did the reinforcements arrive early? Kong Lanxin's face revealed a hint of surprise, as if she had seen something inexplicable. The victorious army was also stunned. They even forgot to curse. Li Hu's mind was blank. He couldn't understand what was going on. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.